Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, and we are live.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. The May 14th, 2026 Governance and Governmental Affairs Committee meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is now 12:04 p.m. Central Time. At this time, we need to call the roll. Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Present.
Trustee Smith,
Present.
Trustee Chapman,
Present.
Trustee Towns. Ma'am, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Governance and Governmental Affairs Committee. I would like to thank my fellow committee members, university leadership, staff, and guests for being here today. As we convene this meeting, I want to acknowledge the important role this committee plays in supporting and sound governance, institutional accountability, and effective engagement with state and governmental partners. The work before us today reflects several key priorities that are critical to the continued advancement of the university. Our agenda includes a legislative update regarding matters affecting university and higher education across the state, a presentation on the university's policy modernization project, and a review of proposed changes to the board's bylaws. Together, these items demonstrate the university's continued commitment to strengthening governance structures, modernizing institutional policies, and remaining responsive to the evolving legislative and regulatory environment. I also want to take a moment to recognize the continued efforts of university leadership, our governmental affairs partners, and committee members who have worked diligently throughout this legislative session to advocate on behalf of Tennessee State University. Their professionalism, preparation, and commitment continue to position the university well as important conversations occur at the state level regarding higher education policy, governance, and funding. As always, I encourage thoughtful discussion and collaboration as we move through today's agenda. So with that, we'll proceed with the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as contained in the materials for the May 14th, 2026 meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, thank you. Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Smith,
Yes,
Trustee Chapman.
Yes.
The motion passes.
thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the February 19th, 2026 Governance and Governmental Affairs Committee meeting minutes. They were included for your review in the materials for today's meeting. Is there a motion for the Governance and Governmental Affairs Committee to recommend to the full board the approval of the February 19th, 2026 committee meeting minutes as contained in the materials?
So moved.
Is there a second?
We double dutching. Second.
Thank you. Secretary Brown, can you please call the roll?
Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Smith,
Yes,
Trustee Chapman.
Yes.
The motion passes.
thank you. The next item on the agenda is the legislative update. Mrs. Leah Dupree Love will provide the information in connection with this agenda item. This is an informational discussion item, so no vote is required. Mrs. Love?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I want to just thank the university leadership and the board, which is leadership as well, for just another great year. I've been doing this for a very long time, and oftentimes when you're working with clients, sometimes they don't understand the process, they don't receive information that well. But I do want to just thank the university for entrusting me for another year to help you navigate these waters. We had a pretty successful year when it came to just what I want to say, just confidence in the university. And so I just want to thank you for allowing me to help you navigate that process, because it is not easy, and you did it well, and I just thank you for allowing me to do that. The second thing I want to say before I get into my update is that I see a lot of interns down at the legislature, and I always want to say that Trustee Azana Bruce was so good. I wish she was here today so I could say that to her face, but seeing interns at the legislature, sometimes they don't represent as well as they should, but I just want you all to know that Tennessee State University had wonderful interns, particularly your student trustee. She did a wonderful job, and I hope that she goes, to the moon and back with whatever she decides to do next in her career, because it was really good to see TSU represented well down at the legislature this year. And so if you see her, tell her that I said that, and it did not go unnoticed how great that she was representing the university in her role. So the first thing I want to just talk about is oftentimes when we talk about funding for the university, the question is, where's the money? Where's the money? But I also want to make sure that people understand that we are a state school and we do receive funding, and what does that funding look like? And so I don't know if you all have this before you, but I can send this back out to everyone individually. But I just kind of want to go over some of the things that was in the budget this year for the university. And so as a land grant, there are 4 buckets that deal with land grant. And so that's our McMinnville Center, the Institute of Ag and Environmental Research, our co-op, and then the McIntyre Stennis Forestry Research. So those are the 4 buckets that funding goes to. And so we receive funding for the salary pool for all of those this year. Additionally, land grant allocation for the university this year for the McMinnville Center was $1.6 million. For the Institute of Agriculture and Environmental Research was $7 million. For our co-op, $240,000, and for the McIntyre Stennis Forestry Research, $233,000. And so I do want to put a pause there. Additionally, there was an additional $1 million recurring that was added to the university this year. And so I have an asterisk by where that's going. So $996,000 is going to the Institute for Ag and Environmental Research, and an additional $4,000 is going to forestry research. And so that is because anytime that the federal government puts money into the budget, the state has to match that. And so this year, the state was more proactive and just go ahead and adding another $1 million recurring to meet that match, if that makes sense. And so we do have an additional $1 million going to our land grant funding in our buckets for those different reasons. And so we did get that this year. Additionally, universities get money for outcome growth, and this money is based on the institutional's progress, if you will. So, student progression, degree production, and, other things like that. And so we received $1,263,000 for outcome growth this year. Can that be higher? Absolutely. But that is just where we are right now based on our institutional outcomes. Additionally, roof and building maintenance, $2.4 million is something that we can use for maintenance. And also just blanket education. The state giving or allocating $71,245,700, and then federally $4.5 million. And so those are things and numbers that are included just to keep the university essentially going and running. A bulk of that money is for land grant because we are a land grant institution, but I did want to just have that on the record, and so people know that while there is money that we can discuss, and we'll have discussions about, money that is essentially owed to the university based on research done by the state, there is money that is in the budget from the state to the university. And so I just wanted to make sure that we all understood what does come in for the university. And I will want to pause right there just in case there's any questions about that part.
Do any
Okay.
committee members have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'll move on to just key legislation. And I've talked with University Counsel about this because a lot of this is going to be coming from the General Counsel's office. But a couple of pieces of legislation that I wanted to remind the board about that deals with something that the board will have to do is about 5 pieces of legislation. And so the first one is the Charlie Kirk Act. The last time I was here, we talked about 2 pieces of legislation that dealt with the Charlie Kirk Act. One would allow a monument to be on campuses. That bill did not pass. And the next bill, it requires, and it did pass, it requires the governing body for each public university to adopt a statement on freedom of expression that is identical to or similar to the University of Chicago's freedom of expression policy. And so it also specifies that requirements for the statement of freedom of expression. And so University Council is aware of this bill, and they're working alongside other LGI attorneys and General Counsel's office to make sure that we are providing that. And so she will be giving more information about what that looks like for you in the future. The other piece of legislation is our sunset. We were able to be extended for 3 years. And I know I've mentioned this before, but where we were at that time and where we are today, we have moved the needle really, really far. Where we were and able to get 3-year extension, you all should be really proud of that. Those of you who understand the sunset process and what that looks like, getting 3 years based on our previous audits, so that lets me know that the state does have confidence in your abilities, and so I just want to make sure, I don't want you to take that lightly on what that meant, that we were able to get a 3-year extension. You all were created, and not created essentially, but you all are here because of the board was vacated. And so to go from that until now where you are today and able to get a 3-year extension, I just want you to be really proud of yourselves and how we were able to work through that. And so that should be a win in your book. The next thing is we talked about changing the timeline of when you all would be rolled off of your appointments. And so remember, there was a piece of legislation that would require all gubernatorial appointees to go before the legislature and then having your term end in February so that your term end during session instead of in June. And remember also that that would essentially add 6 more months to everyone's term so that you weren't essentially appointed in June and then had to get it confirmed during session. That bill passed the legislature, but it was vetoed by the governor on May the 1st. So everything will just stay the way it is. All board members' terms will end June 30th of your respective years. I don't know what that's going to look like for future general assemblies, but the bill was vetoed. I do not know why it was vetoed, but as of right now, everything will stay the same as far as when your terms will end and when you can be reappointed or roll off. The next thing is also a policy thing that the board needs to adopt. It is about tenure decisions from faculty disciplinary actions. And so each university board, it needs to adopt a policy that distinguishes between tenure decisions and action for just regular faculty members. And so again, Attorney Brown has been working on that, and you will hear more about her own policies as it relates to that. And the final thing is a bill that deals kind of with higher education governance. It was a bill that did not initially deal with this, but it was amended. And so on-time graduation for public universities means 4 academic years. So that is what on-time graduation means. And so that's important because if you remember when we talked about money that we get for our outcomes, that's going to matter for that. So the money that we get for what we do and how we produce and how we perform, the on-time graduation check mark is going to be based on 4 years. And so just keeping that in mind when you're thinking about how you govern and expectations that you have for academics for the university, that on-time graduation is 4 years, and that impacts the money that we receive on the funding formula. And also including in that is including a policy regarding how revenues generated by out-of-state tuition, how that is used for operations as well. And so those are two things that are added into that piece of legislation. And again, Attorney Brown is aware of this, and she will be working through what that looks like and how we can adopt policies based on that. And so those are just the things that impacted or does impact decisions that the board has to make. And so I'll stop right there and see if there are any questions about those policies. And again, you will hear more about those policies and what needs to be in there from Attorney Brown, but I wanted to bring it to your attention that these are policies that go into effect July 1.
I just had a quick question, Chair Smith. So, and it's, so with the 4 years, is it 4 years from time of admission? I'm thinking about students that may begin their college career in remedial, or are you saying that's how we are writing the policy to determine what is 4 years?
So if I understand correctly, you're not writing the policy to determine what is 4 years. That is the current law now, that on-time graduation means 4 years. And please correct me if I am wrong in this. I don't know if we have remedial anymore. Please correct me. I may be confused on that. Do we have remedial courses now? No, I don't think there is remedial courses now at universities. So I don't think that part would matter if you started in remedial and then you took, 5 years or did the 5-year engineering path. I don't think that part matters anymore. But by definition, that bill is just saying that on time means 4 years. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions for me? Oh,
Do we know if if the AG's office has provided any opinions on any of these proposals or any guidance at all?
you go ahead, Attorney Brown.
Yes, specifically with respect to the faculty disciplinary actions, they have given us some guidance, because one of the questions that came up was what level of due process needs to be afforded to faculty members under this new policy. And so we have been convening, actually weekly, we meet and working through this, and I've received some of the copies of other institutions' policies that they've been put together so far. Just a couple have gotten down that road so far. I think a lot of boards are going to be taking up their policies in June. And I have been in contact with Provost Schmeller to make sure that we're looking at it and working on our policy. Yes, ma'am.
So again, to that point, these policies go in, or having July 1 is so you need to address this in June as well, if you have meetings in June.
Yes, we are planning a special called meeting in June for, these are the policies that we've been talking about needing.
Okay, so Trustee Smith, Madam Chair, if there are no other questions for me, I will update this and send this back out to everyone, because there was just a little asterisk that I needed to fix. But if there are no other questions for me, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you have a question, or you're waving at me? Oh, okay, I'll waving back. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Policy Modernization Project. The materials for this agenda item are included for your review in the meeting materials. Mrs. Leah Llewellyn, Strategic Advisor, will provide the information in connection with this agenda item. This is for an informational discussion, so no vote is required.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. Chair Winton, trustees, it's truly an honor to stand before you today as an official Tennessee State University person. I didn't know I needed this in my life, but I truly did, and so I'm grateful to be here. We're going to touch just briefly on the policy modernization project. This is crucial this year, and I appreciate the direction from this committee. As we embark on our strategic and master plans in the upcoming year, having updated, efficient, effective policies is going to ensure that we mitigate risk, we are compliant with state and federal regulations. And I think we all recognize that there's much work to be done in this area. And so I am personally excited to see this project through and bring you something that the university can be proud of. I think it's important to note that right now, as we look at the policies that are currently at the university and on our website, there are currently 301 existing policies and procedures that are all listed as policies. And as the team has dug in, we've recognized that many of those policies are actually procedures for university staff. And so there was a team that existed before I arrived. They are working very hard to pull out the procedures from that and create handbooks for those areas. I think that will help us tremendously. And we really do want our university policy page to only have our existing policies. Our policies tell people what to expect from us and what's expected by not just our students, but our stakeholders. And so updating these is critical at this time. As we move forward, we're going to prioritize these based on areas of compliance concerns. And something you will hear from me, not just today, but as we move forward through the strategic and master plans, you're going to be hearing the impact on student experience. If I don't focus on anything, I want to focus on how every single decision that we're making impacts our students. And so you'll see here that we plan to highlight some of our bigger ticket areas that have more policies and more areas of concern to update initially, which include Okay, can you hear me? Okay, sorry. Human resources, business and finance, academic affairs, everything up will be rolled in after that with probably some extra work on the back end. Just wanted to let you know sort of who is leading this helm. So I am going to be the facilitator over this project. I do have Dr. Cynthia Howell. She's the project manager. She's here with me today, and she's already done a tremendous amount of work before I ever got here on this. We do have 12 cabinet members who are the steering committee, so we think of those as like the final approvers before either they go to General Counsel Brown or they come to you for approval. We have 24 staff that are actively working on these policy updates. And then we are also hiring, just for the summer months, 2 9-month faculty who have specialties in this area that are going to help us. We may be able to hire 3, but right now we know that 2 are going to assist us throughout the summer months. As we look moving forward where we're going, our goal right now is to get the 9-month faculty on board, reconvene the working group, and really set the expectation for them moving forward. We have sort of a whole procedure of how to roll these out, set with strict timelines on how each individual group, how long they have to update and review policies. Fast forward to September, would like to complete all HR and business and finance policies. And any of those policies that require board approval, we want to bring those to you in September. And then we are going to update the remaining policies by the end of this calendar year, so December of 26. And that if there is the board meeting in February, we would bring any policies to you at that time. Sort of post-policy, doing these policies is a big part of the process, but one of the things that I'm always concerned about is where are the gaps. And just even an initial review, we know that we have gaps in our policies. And so we're going to be reviewing our LGI partners' policies as part of a post-project initiative and create policies to fill those gaps. And of course, we'll submit them to you for approval at that time. One of the things that we recognized when we started this conversation is that there has to be an annual review. It's unacceptable for it to go a long period of time without having policies reviewed by the staff that are doing that work every day and by their leadership. And so we're creating an annual review policy that is going to be required, and that will be led by Dr. Cynthia Howell, who is the Assistant Vice President for Risk and Financial Compliance. And outside of that, we really want to create an environment of training and mentorship. We want to make sure that when new staff are onboarded, our students, if they are student policies, that they have an opportunity to know these policies. It's hard to set expectations for anyone if we don't have it written down in a policy. And so that's our goal through this, is that not only will there be an annual review process, there will be an annual training process as well. That is what I have for you guys. I'm so appreciative of your time, but I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
I've got one. Do you know when's the last time the university has conducted this type of comprehensive review?
Chair Winton, I do not. I don't, I'm not sure if anyone,
What I can speak to, Chair Winton, is that most of these policies are legacy TBR policies. So these are going back to the Focus Act, so 2016.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure that a comprehensive review has been done since then.
Okay, thank you.
and Chair Winton, I would be willing to say that some of those policies, even at 2016, needed to be updated. So we'll make sure that we have TSU standalone policies.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. And Trustee Smith, maybe this would be for you. Is there a reason this review is occurring under the Governance and Governmental Affairs Committee versus the Executive Committee, which I think the Executive Committee, per our policies, has responsibility for standards of conduct and the internal control structure?
So I think this is led by the university. So they are updating their policies. They'll bring them to governance, and then I guess governance, this is kind of the working group for it, but it will be presented to the full board for approval.
So that coordinated work wouldn't happen under the Executive Committee?
I believe, well, Chair Winton, when putting this committee together, tasked us with looking at the governance structure for the university and for the board. And so I guess by its very nature, it's just the work is happening here to be presented to the full board for review. So.
And I can chime in on that too. As the person who has to call the executive committee, what I felt like was the most appropriate approach, given the fact that these policies haven't been reviewed since 2016. This is more of a procedural thing. The goal of governance itself is to ensure that we are operating in governing. And so the reason why this committee is taking this on is because historically, we have operated for the past 2 years in a state of, I would say, almost emergency. I explained to someone the other day that we've been operating as if the house is on fire, and now we're just dealing with the smoke. And so in order to get our infrastructure in a better position, that is the reason why the governance committee was tasked with this assignment versus having something being done in executive committee, because I didn't think that was the appropriate approach for the executive committee.
And then I don't know if this question would be for Trustee Smith or for you, Ms. Llewellyn. A lot of these policies touch on different areas of responsibility for various board committees. So what's the approach for those board committees to set the direction, the tone, and have the input necessary for your work to occur? For example, business and finance policies would touch not only on the finance committee, but also the audit committee. Then there may be academic affairs policies that would touch on the academic affairs committee. And I just wanted to know what your approach would be to that integration with the committees and how they will play into this process.
Absolutely. And so the steering committee, which are President Tucker's cabinet members, or most of them, they will take the leadership role in that. And then as advised by council, we will issue those, because what we want to do is we want to make sure everyone has a voice in these policies, and we want to make sure that we are not missing anything, right? We don't want to rewrite these again in a year. And so Attorney Brown will help us do that as far as navigating which committee needs to review before it ever goes to the full Board of Trustees. So Attorney Brown will help us navigate that area.
And then my last question, because I understand this is a huge endeavor as you laid out, and the number of policies that are contained or that would be subject to review and possibly updated. Are you approaching this or looking at this from a risk-based perspective of what policies might need to be addressed first, or categories of policies, or what would be the risk-based taxonomy that you would use to conduct this review?
So the first thing we're looking at is our audit reports. I think those are the most critical areas, and frankly, areas that there's some gaps. And then from there, we will be, each cabinet member is truly, they're not just the leader in that area, but they should be the expertise in that area. And so as cabinet, we will be leaning on each other to pull those that are at most risk. I will tell you that I am also reviewing them all. President Tucker is reviewing them all. There is a heavy touch on this because I do think it's really important. And I do think it's a short timeline to get it done, but I feel strongly that if we don't act swiftly on this, it will impede on other projects as well, right? So, thank you. Thank you, trustees.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the review of the proposed changes to bylaws of the Board of Trustees. The materials for this agenda item are included in your review, in your materials for this committee meeting. Included in your board materials is a proposed draft of the reconstructed bylaws of the Board of Trustees. The draft provided in your materials include provisions based on legislation that was later vetoed, and an updated draft will be provided to the board secretary to upload to the board portal. Specifically, we need to remove provision section 1.5G and H. The governance committee has been tasked to provide the substantive analysis and drafted recommendations that will be brought to the full board for review and ultimate approval. The governance committee will schedule a meeting to review the proposed bylaws with the goal to recommend adoption to the full board before July 1, 2026. So, are there any questions or discussion about this at this time?
One thing I offer as a committee member is just, the appreciation of digging and pulling all the onion layers back to try to remove some of the ambiguity or the things that just did not exist originally so that we can create a structure that we can go forward as the new board. So a lot of work has gone into it, and it's my hope that the full board will trust the committee.
Thank you. I was about to say the exact same thing. You said it much better than I was going to say it, so thank you for saying that.
I do have a question, Trustee Smith or Chair Smith. With the document, is there a red line, or are we creating a completely new draft and we'll just go from that? There were so many corrections that you just created a new document?
Yes.
Okay.
How many corrections?
Yes, it's an entirely new document.
All right, thank you.
Trustee Smith, I have a few questions. A similar question on this item, that our current policies reserve responsibility for the bylaws to the executive committee. Is there a reason that the governance committee is taking this project on too?
Same reasons as before. Our Chair Winton, created a new standing committee with the function and power that is deemed appropriate, and this is what she's tasked us to do. And it's just, this is the working group for it. We will bring it to the full board for approval in the same way that the policies will be handled.
And just to follow up, and this may be for Secretary Brown, does this approach present any risks to us where we are, or things have been assigned to committees that are not consistent with our policies or bylaws? Is there any risk that something we later approve may not have the proper authority because it wasn't, or may not have been taken through the proper channels?
You know, when I looked at our executive committee responsibilities, I see that it says, and this is in section 9A 2D, it says the executive committee is periodically reviewing and ensuring compliance with the board bylaws and other board policies and recommending amendments when appropriate. It doesn't really address a wholesale change of the bylaws. Regardless, I think the important thing is going to be that the full board is going to have to vote on whatever happens. From reading the proposed changes to the bylaws, it will more fully flesh out what the roles and responsibilities of the Governance and Governmental Affairs Committee are. Those were never put into the existing bylaws, so that needs to be clarified too. But I understand that that's the work that this document is seeking to do. So in terms of risk, I think very low, so long as it comes before the whole board and the board takes a vote on whatever action is coming out of it.
And if I may offer a comment too, that some of the structure that we were asked to create at the time of emergency appointment did not even sink in with what our current bylaws were. And that in our role as governance, this is part of the job. And I hear what you're saying. And if it pleases the board, if it feels that it's an additional necessary step to keep, us moving in the same direction, if it pleases the board for it to come to executive committee, Chair Smith, I welcome your thoughts here in terms of, do we need to just call a special session to get this in front? But it sounds like, again, part of why we're doing this is because there's so much ambiguity. Nothing is very clearly stated.
Right. I think, as Attorney Brown stated, if the risk is low, especially if it is approved by the full board. The meeting will be noticed to all board members. Everyone can attend and provide their input. And so I think I don't think we will miss any voices with the way we already operate. And we want to get this taken care of, as soon as possible. So I don't know that it's a necessary step, but I guess once the committee convenes, if we decide and vote to send it to exec for an additional review and full recommendation from, joint recommendation from exec and governance, that could be up to this committee as well. So I think, at that next meeting, we can, determine if that's even necessary, but I don't think it's necessary.
Well, and two, once everyone gets the document, if there's anything that you want to discuss and highlight, the committee is definitely open to continuing the conversation.
I agree.
So I just have one comment to that and then a question on something different. I understand there may not be perceived, identifiable, direct risk. The only reason I'm raising this just to make sure that we're careful in our approach, but also understanding that with the prior agenda item about the policies and now talking about our bylaws, that if we are not following our own bylaws or policies and how we enact those things, is that setting a bad tone for the university and the structures that we're trying to set up. And I just want to make sure that we're setting not only ourselves up for success in the process that we undertake to make these things happen, but that we're having that culture of compliance throughout the university and that we're following it just as we would expect the university staff, faculty, students to follow.
I think what you're saying is perfect. and it's the reason why the committee is working to remove the ambiguity. Because in order for us to truly follow the bylaws as a standard, or any policy or any procedure as a standard, the picture just needs to be painted a little bit clearer. And because the pictures have not been painted clear, many times we had to just ride the bike while we were building it. And so what the committee is doing is just trying to create the standard that you're speaking of, so that we can move forward the right way as we continue to govern the university.
So moving to my question on a different topic, and just looking at the bylaws, and I've only been able to skim them because I think they were published sometime this week to the website and to our internal site. And I noticed that these are written as bylaws where our current structure has bylaws and policies, but these are bylaws. Is there an effort, or will there be an effort to align that structure? Or how would we approach, or is there a proposal of how we're approaching the current structure of bylaws and policies with these revised bylaws? Because it didn't appear, and I could be wrong, and I should have prefaced all this with that I appreciate all the work that's already been done, but it wasn't clearly evident to me that the proposed bylaws reflect a replacement of our current bylaws and policies.
Is there a specific area that you're pointing out? I mean, because again, even for it to be called bylaw and policy, when some of it is bylaw, it's literally just what you're saying, the reason why. But I mean, Chair Smith can help answer your question.
Well, and I can give an example too, just for clarity, because currently our bylaws are set up as standalone bylaws, but we have a policy concerning committee structure. So these proposed bylaws now incorporate that policy about committee structures into the bylaws. And I'm just wondering, has that been done en masse with all the other policies? Are they now being incorporated into the bylaws, or are we still having this separate structure that's currently in place?
With regard to this project, the bylaws have, the way it's drafted to incorporates the policies into the, so we have one document instead of the bylaws and then all of the policies. So I think it's all integrated here in this proposed document.
And just based upon my read, I think and just from reviewing what you've already really put a lot of substantive work and time into doing, but I think what would have to happen is obviously bylaws, just like in any board, they are a moving and live document. And so what the goal is to, number one, align the university to where we are today versus where we have historically been. And I think in terms of the policies that go along with them, there are some things that will still need to be fleshed out, which was noted in Leah Llewellyn's presentation in terms of those board policies. So there will be some things outside of what these bylaws suggest that we will have to go through and review so that we can make sure that those things are aligned. But I don't think that they were, the bylaws were designed to just completely eradicate all of the policies. It was just really more of to update the bylaws. And Trustee Smith, if I'm speaking wrong, then please.
No, that is correct. And I'm looking through, and I guess I've read these things quite a bit and was reading them late last night. And so I think there are some things that are in the current policies that ended up in the bylaws, this draft of the bylaws. And so, like you said, I think this is what this review will kind of address. I think you're absolutely right on, that's what this whole process will address, making sure that we are completely covered when it comes to our governance documents.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Smith, I have a question. Are you open to questions about the document now, or is that later? So
Later.
okay.
And the reason I say that is this document, we still have some more edits. I mean, and I guess I'm open. We can talk about them now. if you have them, and we can make notes of those things so that when the committee does meet fully, we can, go into that meeting
Yeah,
with
this one
some.
was just an observation and maybe going along the lines of what you all were just talking about. The executive committee, is it now no longer a standing committee? And how are you, it's listed as an establishment, but it's not under the other standing committees. Can you talk through that distinction? Section 5.3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think most executive committees are standing committees today for for most organizations. So the way that I read it, it was to align with what
Mm-hmm.
typical boards and how they operate. So most don't have a standing executive committee, but I mean, again, I'll defer to Trustee Smith. I
No,
think we've all probably spent way too much time reading the documents because they were put in the portal like 3 weeks ago, I think. I can't remember when Trustee Smith sent them out to us, so we've all looked at them way too much, probably.
yeah. So I guess in the structure of this, you're right. Executive committee is not out. It's not a standing committee, but the officers of the board um, are make up the executive committee. So I don't know that it has to necessarily be a standing committee because the officers will always exist. But if you think that is something that we need to consider, we can take that up.
No, I was just asking, just reading through and noticed that it was no longer an executive committee. And given how we're currently operating, where we are not operating typically through an executive committee right now, but more so as needed. I mean, the chair has decided that most things are being discussed full board. But my question is, if we're moving forward with this, maybe the question is, do we even need an executive committee if we're going to operate with the other standing committees?
Bingo. And that's the only thing that I will add. Our board is just so intimate that you're raising a good question that we can take back as a committee. Is it even necessary? We're only a handful, and then of that handful, you got the chairs. All of our meetings are open to anybody who wants to join. So I'm glad you're going down that train of thought because is it even necessary? And we can take that back into discussion. And that's my thought there, Chair Smith.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Again, an updated draft will be circulated and everyone will be noticed about when we meet to discuss this, and we welcome any discussion in everyone puts in, so that we can put together a document that will work well for the university and our board. All right, is there any additional business? If none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have a question.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm not a committee member, but it's a question. Just in
Mhm.
following through, we've been through on 2 years, and I think we're supposed to have a board assessment. Are we going to do that? Is that planned?
We can add it to the plan. I don't know. I have not been a part of any discussions about a board assessment, but I definitely think would be timely, and we can add that to what we need to do in the upcoming year.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Double Dutch. Second.
Thank you, Secretary Brown. Can you call the roll?
Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Chapman,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. The motion is approved. The time is now 12:53, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
We'll take a quick break before starting the Finance Committee at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Finance Committee meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is 1:03 Central Time. At this time, we need to call the roll. Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Chair Winton,
Present.
Trustee Trauber,
Present.
Trustee Norfleet, Trustee Towns.
Present.
We have a quorum present.
Thank you. So before we move into the agenda, I want to briefly level set our approach to today's materials and discussion. Across the items we'll review, I see a common thread. The university is attempting to take steps to stabilize its financial position. We are not yet at a point where our progress is clearly defined, fully sustainable, or easy to evaluate from a governance perspective. I think we've made many steps in the right direction, and we still have many steps to continue. To help guide our discussion, I hope we focus on some recurring themes. Clarity of our true financial position. As we look at budgets, forecasts, and updates, I want to ensure we are all aligned on what the numbers represent. Is it back? Okay. As we look at budgets, forecasts, and updates, I want to ensure we are all aligned on what the numbers represent, particularly the distinction between operating results, structural performance, and the impact of temporary or non-recurring items. I want us to look at our sustainability versus our stabilization. We have, and to some extent continue to rely on one-time actions and external support, which we are extremely grateful to have. We should seek to understand what our financial position looks like on a sustained, go-forward basis. I want us to think about the linkage between assumptions and outcomes, because our projections rely on key drivers like enrollment, cost reductions, and strategic investments. So we should focus on how we translate those assumptions into outcomes and how sensitive those outcomes are if assumptions change, which will be the utmost importance to us. We should have discipline around our resources and prioritization. We have many important decisions around investments, cost and revenue actions, and capital allocation. We should seek to ensure these decisions are clearly prioritized and tied to measurable financial or strategic outcomes. I also want us to be decision-ready action. Finally, as a committee, our role is oversight. That requires us to clearly understand variances, risk, and trade-offs. This will allow us to be actionable and ensure the administration is equipped to act swiftly and measured when needed. So with that, we can get into our agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as contained in the materials for this May 14th, 2026 meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Secretary Brown?
Yes, and I will reflect that Trustee Norfleet has joined the meeting. Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Trauber,
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet,
Yes.
Trustee Towns.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the February 20, 2026 Finance Committee meeting minutes. The minutes are included for your review in our board materials for this May 14, 2026 committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Secretary Brown?
Chair Winton, Trustee Trauber,
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet,
Yes.
Trustee Towns.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Finance Administration update. The materials for this item are also included in your materials for this committee meeting. Ms. April Robinson, Chief Financial Officer, will provide the information in connection with this agenda item. This is an informational item only, and there will be no action required. Thank you, Mrs. Robinson.
And Chair
Trevor, the next, I think it's 5 items, will all be contained in the same report, if you're agreeable to this.
Works for me. Thank you.
So starting with, here are the items that we'll go through for information purposes only. And I think for the purpose of the discussion, let's not wait. Chair, if you're agreeable to this, for questions at the end, maybe we integrate them and ask them as we go through the slides.
I think that would be perfect.
Okay. So first, starting with our finance administration update priorities. The last time we were together, we talked about my 30-day reset. So since that time, we continue to experience the impact of that 30-day culture reset. We're also really deep into the remediation of our audit findings. We have in our starting the implementation of our training plan for business and finance staff. Our budget process, we've just wrapped up, which we'll talk about. The last time we were together, we talked about administrating a zero-based budget, and I think that's what we've done, really taking a hard look at our operational structure and making sure that we are not only sustaining ourselves, but Chair, to your point earlier, making progress in reducing our deficit. We're also taking a very hard look at our contract management right now with a new resource, a new system, lining up all of our contracts to be reviewed to make sure that the university is getting the best value out of the services that we're contracting. And then as we look forward to the next 120 days, just a couple call outs on work that's going now that'll finish up is our grants reconciliation. So the team is working pretty feverishly on trying to reconcile a number of aged grants that we have outstanding. And so originally that work was set to conclude June 30th. And so we're hoping by June 30th, with the plan that the team has set out, that we'll be in a position to have reconciled all of the priority grants, and priority meaning the biggest ones, outstanding by the end of June. Yes.
I do have two questions on that.
Yes.
If I may,
Yes, you may.
Chair Trauber.
Thank you.
No, he
Yes.
really runs
Proceed.
a tight committee here. Two simple questions. How are we documenting the training of the staff?
We're developing an actual training plan, like a project management plan that we'll be able to share when it's done, that has timelines and the subjects that we'll be training on.
So when they complete the training, how will we have records or documentation that they've actually gone through training?
It's our staff, and so I think we were just thinking off of very simple, being able to check them off of the list. But if there's something more formal that you think we may need just to refer back to, surely we would be open to that, to add to that. We weren't planning it now, but that may be a good thought.
You know, part of it just stems from previous discussions on the audit findings and people. Well, I didn't know that I was supposed to do this, or I didn't know. And so there was no documentation that they had ever been trained on anything. So that's why I was wondering, where is it housed?
Yes, good thought.
The second question, simple. What is considered finance adjacent?
So those personnel that exist in other departments that maybe do the budget for that department, or they do some of the accounting and reconciling work, or they are the ones responsible for opening POs and requisitions. So that's what I consider business and finance adjacent, that impact a lot of the work that we do inside of business and finance.
And just one other thing, if you're talking about organizational structures across those departments, then how do you see that being integrated?
And one of the opportunities we are looking at is does it make sense for us to centralize those resources? So we're looking at that, and just overall trying to optimize how business and finance for a lot of functions is the back end, right? That's where it ends. But trying to be more proactive in owning those resources and inputs earlier in our processes. So we're definitely looking at that to try to incorporate it into an org structure. Thank you, Chair Trauber. So the next item is on the university's proposed increase to tuition and fees. So we'll start by looking at TSU's overall value proposition. Being a R2 research activity and in great academic standing university, our investment across STEM and innovation, high impact student support around growth. Our student life is vibrant. And then adding on a value proposition tenet around the environment in which a student will experience coming to school in Nashville. So a very vibrant nightlife for students during college, having great opportunities for in school employment, as well as some elevated options after postgraduate. And so all of these things kind of represent what we think is the university's value proposition as a basis for looking at our tuition increase. The next kind of high level thought is our current operational structure right now. Where TSU is the lowest cost tuition provider in the state and doing it in the highest cost metro area. This is not something that's unique to TSU or even something that's unique to higher education. Any business that's operating in that type of operational structure has a challenge in making sure it is kind of keeping pace with its cost increases, with its changing dynamics. And so we put just a few metrics on the slide as a comparison, whether it's population, typical home value, and then our resulting tuition, just as a representation of that dynamic market that Nashville represents. A couple other more quantitative considerations were around us keeping an eye on the CPI index, both the all items, which is the summary note, as well as the individual categories, to make sure that, and not just as a consideration for tuition increases, but make sure we're being proactive around how the university needs to expect to manage any cost increases, because also as a university that is light on a reserve, that means being proactive is our best weapon and tool at making sure that we're prepared. And so all in all, our proposed tuition rate increase rests. We have mandatory program fees that make up $300 increase annually, and this is based on a 15-hour student. And then the total overall increase is the 4.5% that the university will be proposing to the board for an actual action and vote next month, I think. And so the $425 annual increase is what we're proposing. And here's the undergraduate in-state tuition for both our LGI peers as well as our does this one have the next one has the HBCU base. So this is just our in-state peers, and as we can see, this is just trying to highlight exactly what I said on a few slides before, us being in the position where we are the lowest cost provider in the state. And this is our undergraduate out-of-state comparison, and this one includes LGIs as well as a line for our HBCU peers. And this is a place where you can see that our out-of-state tuition is really outpacing in the peers, and that's why you'll see on the next slide that we've suggested or recommended that we keep our full freight undergraduate tuition flat. So that's why you see for both undergraduate and graduate those zeros. And again, trying to recognize where our out-of-state premium currently exists in order for us to be competitive for surrounding colleges that are out of state. Here's the program service fees of our increased recommendations. So you can see, just to call out a few, the justifications are on the right. Many of them are around, these program service fees were done in connection with a side-by-side peer analysis. Again, both LGIs and our HBCU peers as well. The impact on the budget is about $1.9 million from each of the rates in the chart. And I want to make sure that I call out the note at the bottom, in that this tuition increase is not meant to solve our structural deficit. The last time we were together at our last board meeting, I said that our budget process for F27 was meant to produce a budget that could put a tuition increase in the bank. And so that's what we've done. So the budget for FY27 that you see today does not include this $1.9 million. And then here are our proposed uses for the tuition increase that I want to make a note. These items that you see on the screen are already included in our budget. So we've included the expenses for them, but again, haven't reflected that increase in tuition. One, because of the operational decisions to want to be able to bank that in the reserve, but also because it hasn't been approved by this board. So didn't want to base our budget on having that increase. Any questions there?
Chair Winton?
Thank you. And I appreciate the use of funds, it's particularly in regards to the student experience impact. Do you have a breakdown in terms of the number of out-of-state students that we have today versus in-state students that we have today?
We do. It's I thought I put it in the index of it. Right now, we are about 50-50, call it, out of state, which is a big number. We're leading, obviously, us and UT have the biggest out of state population. So our undergraduate is really heavily represented with out of state students.
Okay.
But I can get the exact numbers for you.
Thank you. That would be helpful. The reason why, excuse me, the reason why I was asking the question is if we're going to hold the out-of-state flat and then in-state. So for those individuals who are inside the city already living in Nashville, for those new students, well, the students that have been here with us, they're going to they are consistently seeing an increase, and I want to make sure that they know when we're thinking about these increases that they have something that they are getting from these tuition increases.
Yes, so here it is at the top. I forgot that we had put it.
Thank
So
you.
both the percentage of the student body and the actual numbers, but understood 100% on our. So the thought around the out of state was looking at the chart. We did ask ourselves, wow, the in-state chart obviously looks completely different, but wanting to stay competitive not only with our LGIs in mind, but that HBCU peer group in mind as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Trustee Qualls.
I'll start with easy questions. $44 to $150 fee increase for IDs and parking passes. Can you explain that?
Yes. So one, it was benchmarked against other LGIs, but what's increasing is now parking passes will automatically be included. If you have a car, you won't have to register separately for that. Our expansion of ID badge swipes And so really trying to increase the security on campus. And so whether that's our plan to add licensed readers and adding badge access places where we don't currently have it right now.
And if I don't have a car?
It will just be included in a mandatory fee. Yeah.
So my other question goes back to the tuition and increase.
Yes.
I'm not against tuition fee increases. I am a bit more, I think we have to build our value proposition a bit more. And it's no secret where our areas of opportunity are. And so when we make the argument when you make the argument here, we're the lowest cost and the highest cost city, you also have to look at our institutional data. Do you think that given the profile of our students, our student population coming in, Pell eligibility, will an additional increase, how will that impact their retention, stop out, all of those types of things that we typically monitor with our second year of an increase?
Understood. So with the $425 dollar increase annually, one of the things that we looked at was of the purge students for both fall semester and spring, what were the average balances of those students that were purged? And the answer to both of those for both semesters was just under $5,000. And so for us, that was one kind of data point to indicate that we're not purging students who are just on the bubble. It wasn't a small, less than $1,000 balance that's being purged. We also had minimum students where what they needed that were supported through something like foundation purge funds, that we didn't have a lot of students that had to be supported that had $1,000 balances or less. Right. And so for us, that was another kind of secondary data point of our students who have had trouble to be here have larger balances. And so those were two of kind of many that come to mind that we considered around the affordability and the ability, or in making sure we're not significantly negatively impacting our students' ability to pay.
How much did we get from the foundation this year?
We got 3.2, but we only used, that was in the spring, and we only used maybe 60% of that.
And do we anticipate having to rely on the foundation, or how much will we have to rely on the foundation for fall 26 and spring 27?
Good question. For the university, we don't build our plan to have to rely on foundation funds. Every semester, it is an individual ask, and so with some additional institution funds that we are trying to build our plan to not have to rely on that. So, in fall it was 3.3, and then like I said, in spring it was the 3.2, but it also has the backdrop of not having done a purge in 7-8 years, which we think is a significant impact just on the culture of students expecting to pay, right? Because we did our ultimate purge list was less than 200 that we ended up with.
Okay. Trustee Bruce. I see your
Thank
hand.
you.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I just had the question. Seeing this and seeing the justifications for the tuition increases, I know a lot of students, especially upcoming seniors, I think they were like the last class to receive kind of like the full rise and things like that. And then just seeing kind of the changes that have happened over the years, do we have any plan on how we're going to communicate this to the student body? Of course, like, they are not the ones that are planning on attending the board meetings all day, but just to give them some type of relief and ease of mind, so they can see exactly where their money is going to.
Yes, that's a very good question. And as we've tried to do better as in general with our communication to significant decisions that impact student experience, I think that's a great idea. We hadn't honestly, in all transparency, talked about that yet, but I think I can confidently say that that will be a part of the rollout of making sure that this is socialized with students and being able to hold the university accountable for this increase and partnering with the students to make sure we're delivering the value that both students and this board is asking for. Great prompt.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow question about the purge students? Because you mentioned there were less than 200 that were purged. Did the 3.8 million go to, I guess help me explain where the 3.8 of the foundation funds went to. And I appreciate the fact that y'all are not planning to depend on the foundation, but I know that that's a resource for students. So we want to make sure that we have a plan for that.
Yes, so the funds went to students after I think our first purge starts 3 weeks before the last one. So it starts at we call the list an at risk. So if you had a balance more than $200 at the first purge, that's where we start reviewing for potential support that the foundation funds can provide if the students meet the criteria that was set forth by the foundation for the funds.
Okay, so in total, do you know the number of students that were impacted in total? Because you mentioned just the 200 that were total impact. So I'm trying to get the full university.
Yes, we do have that, and I
Okay.
can get that for you.
Perfect, thank
Yes,
you.
we do have that.
Trustee Qualls.
It's a follow-on to Chair Winston's question about the foundation and the criteria that the foundation used. Was it only a financial need, or did we look into academics standing as well? And how did they determine what criteria they were going to use to provide these funds?
Okay, good question, and I'm not speaking for the foundation, only speaking for the criteria that the foundation gave to us. So, one, yes, it was academic. So first, you had to be a student in good academic standing. You had to have at least, if you were a senior, a 2.0, and that was in line with graduation standards, right? So you can graduate with a 2.0, and so that was the minimum that a senior could have, and then a non-senior was a 2.5. Other criteria also included, because the thought around the funds from the foundation was it shared sacrifice. So if a student had federal loans available to them, they had to have taken their loans as a indicator of, everyone has kind of skin in the game of making sure that you stay in school and receive your degree. Those were the major ones. I'm not missing one.
Thankfully, just for the seniors. Okay.
All right, I just had one, I don't know if this is a question, maybe it's more a comment. Excuse me. If I make this comment or ask this question, fine if you don't have a response, but I just want us to think about the product placement of our university. I know you mentioned us being one of the lowest cost tuition providers in a high cost city. And I understand that can drive some of the dynamics of how we place our product. But I want us to think more strategically about, is that why a student would choose TSU just because we're in Nashville? Is it Nashville that's driving it, or is it a collection of things that drive that decision? And then if it's that collection of things that are faculty programs, the experience that they get at a HBCU, or the experience they get in a metro city that leads to opportunities, how are we positioning that differently than other universities that are in this city that we compete with, or universities that are in this state that don't have the attributes that we have because we're in Nashville? Mm-hmm. So I think if we could drive that home a little bit more, it may justify the tuition increase and justify why we believe we are adding some value to a student who chooses our university. somewhat along the lines of, I think maybe it was questioning that Trustee Qualls had about are students being rate sensitive or having some rate sensitivities. And I understand the 1.9 million that we would get from this tuition increase, as you described it, would be kind of put in the bank. And that's assuming that even when we walk through the budget, there's some one-time money that kind of helps us get through the year. So with that 1.9 million, have we run a sensitivity analysis of if there is an increase, how that might impact enrollment, not only in this year, but in subsequent years, given that we did 6% last year? And is that going to drive down our projections on revenue that would come from the tuition increase? And again, if you don't have that information now, it's fine. But those are things I would like us to consider and to be able to evaluate maybe ahead of our next meeting,
Understood.
unless you have a response.
No, we have not done an elasticity analysis on the students for the tuition increase, but one that we can definitely do. I also wanted to add to your first point, the items that were on the list for our value proposition were based from a direction from enrollment, because we can use data points as indicators, but ultimately our enrollment team is on the front line of our student attraction, right? And so I asked them what were the top things that students are asking about, what are the things that are resonating with students the most, and that's how actually we got those items on the slide.
Trustee Qualls.
I like this discussion because it's an opportunity for us to kind of integrate a lot of different things. And so you mentioned enrollment. When we talk about our value proposition, why are we coming to Tennessee State University? We're all alone. Everyone around the table has a degree from Tennessee State. But why? And why do we have that pride? Do you also talk to the academic side of the house and understanding, what's new, why are students choosing to come to college, and where are our students going after they leave? Because that's another attractive point, and I don't think that we do a really good job of promoting that. I mean, I know know what the institutional data says, and I understand what's in the fact book, but how are you incorporating all of that into your analyses when you're thinking about this tuition increase and the value proposition for coming to Tennessee State University, a R2 comprehensive regional institution in Nashville?
Yes, I definitely think that we have more to offer than even that's communicated on the slide. One of the things that us and enrollment that incorporates our academic side of the house was a recent tour of our Smart Center on Avon Williams, and that is a place that, admittedly, I've been here a little over 5 months, and that was the first time that I had interacted with what we have academically to offer around AI, around innovation. And so it's one of the things that, even with enrollment being there, of asking ourselves, how can we incorporate this tour, this opportunity into our campus tour visits, which are currently being talked about. It was integrated recently in our new student orientation or preview week, because that is a big academic space that is probably more quiet than it should be as far as student impact. But it is one of the things that when students are introduced to what we have to offer, that is resonating with them. So I would agree with you that we probably have more work to do there.
All right, if no more questions, we can continue on. Thank you.
FY26 estimated budget. So what you're seeing on the screen is how we anticipate finishing this academic year. This includes a consideration for where we are actuals through March, and then an anticipated of how we'll finish. A couple things, obviously the impact of our significantly lower freshman class for this year was something that the university had to persevere through, right? We did this by managing our costs more tightly in order for us to be able to produce, and we'll see the comparisons of this estimated budget compared to our forecast and our pro forma and what we were still able to do despite some challenges. This budget also has the benefit, has the financial impact of our VSP program. And on the screen, this is where our voluntary separation plan landed. The number that's most relevant to the F-26 budget is the 4.3 of estimated payout, which reflects about 40 eligible applicants taking the buyout. Our applicant breakdown, we went into the program having 239 known eligible faculty members. And in three kind of key areas, these are the results of the either applying or not. So first, starting with retirement status. So the tenured faculty that was eligible for retirement, we had 75% of them that did not apply, and 25% that did. Next, from tenure status, both tenure and on track status, we again the 85% to 15% that didn't apply versus that did. And then lastly, from a years of service standpoint, the 20-year plus years of service, we had just shy of 80% that didn't apply. Any questions? Yes.
Trustee Qualls? You gonna wait or now? Okay.
Okay. And these are some of the strategic investments inside of the FY26 budget that are present. So we talked about enrollment, both people and technology, as well as travel and operation expenses. So we'll talk about enrollment projections for F27, but that was a great and needed investment for F26. Also, some business and finance investments around stabilizing some of our core functions. And that's F26 estimated. Any questions?
Trustee Qualls? No?
Oh, I thought you were about to ask about the VSP. I have a question about it. Just in the sense of when you, because we're talking about this, and I know for the people who have been paying attention, they will remember why we even implemented this process in the first place. But if you don't mind, just give it like 2 sentences as to why we're doing this, and then just share that, we still have enough professors, we still have enough faculty to ensure that the students are getting quality education, and we're still considering new programs, all of those things
Okay.
to help, to help understand why we're even having this discussion.
Okay, perfect. Yes, so the voluntary separation plan started from an analysis looking at our faculty to student ratio. With our current enrollment, we really wanted to make sure that from a cost and also a programmatic standpoint, we were in the best position. And so that analysis produced a ratio for student to faculty, and then that student to faculty ratio for TSU was then applied and compared rather to our LGIs, as well as some other peer HBCU peers. And so with that analysis identified that in order to right size our faculty for the enrollment that we have right now, we were about 80 to 100 faculty too heavy. And so that was really the basis that the voluntary separation plan was offered. And so during the assessment of applicants applying as well as finalizing who would be allowed to take the separation plan, those programmatic requirements, whether that's around accreditation, just availability of faculty to teach required courses, making sure all required and needed faculty commitments were made and done was a part of the assessment process. And it was not just a blanket, obviously, because it matters by individual school, by program. All of that was done to make sure the 40 that were allowed to accept the buyout, that we could indeed spare them without missing any offering or having any reduction in academic output.
Thank you. And the last, and they have, if someone else wanted to take the volunteer separation plan, is that time passed for them or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Qualls.
Yeah, so this is always a lessons learned after you do the after action review type of thing, and you notice some assumptions that were made. What did you learn, and how are you going to take those learnings to apply for future workforce adjustments? That's part one of the question.
Okay. Yeah.
The second part goes along with what Chair Winton was saying. So the faculty, you can imagine if they, tenure promotion was paused, here's the VSP, there's uncertainty. How are we assessing the morale? And I'm glad you made that statement that we're still here in business. We still are here to educate students and carry out our mission. So how are you assessing the morale and addressing the morale of potentially the faculty who may have low morale?
Okay. So for the first question, I think the biggest gap that we had on our assumptions coming into the plan versus how the actual shook out is in that first box on the left. So our assumptions that we used in our model around faculty that was retirement eligible, that we would have had a much larger percentage of that group apply. And that was really based on, some of the feedback that even though a part of the separation plan was providing a cash equivalent for 12 months of health care, but if that were to be a barrier or a challenge for someone to take the buyout, that being retirement eligible then brings in additional support like Medicaid or Medicare. And so I would say, that group that was a surprise that we're not as interested in the buyout. And related to that, a lesson learned was probably around, I guess by definition, if faculty members did not take the buyout, that means they have a better deal where they are now. Whether that means, they were happy with being at TSU, and for the record, if you are happy at being at here, we want you to be here. And so not taking it was an opportunity for us to maybe reevaluate and practice, help support those faculty needs in other areas. One of the things that has come out of this is that, our performance management, making sure that, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry about that. Making sure, sorry. Making sure that we are prepared both ways to support faculty with what they need, and also creating an environment where there's an equitable expectation and accountability around what the university needs and what faculty is to provide. So I do agree that there was definitely a learning opportunity for us with some gaps in our assumptions around the program.
Dr. Teraviti.
First, this was a very good analysis, and I appreciate the fact that given your original expectation that 80 to 100 faculty will take and 40 faculty took, and something unusual but interesting finding is that approximately those who are tenure tracked, those are the faculty who bring in young energy, new ideas to the university. And unfortunately, that cohort showed significant interest to leave. Um, One analysis could be faculty at TSU like to work at TSU, which is true. But at the same time, when young faculty are leaving, who are just fresh in the job market and again entering the job market, uh, is there something for us to think about the infrastructure needs of the new faculty or the new faculty who are coming with ideas, how to retain those faculty?
I don't want to speak outside of my depth as the CFO to answer that one. I
Just a
think that's
comment,
one
maybe.
that we'll take away to make sure we're assessing because I think it was okay. Yes, 36% of the on tenure track did apply. So not the majority, but still, to your point, a pretty significant amount of them that did.
I just had a couple of questions on the 26 estimated budget. On the view of the budget, I think it was maybe the first slide.
Okay. Oh, yes.
And I just want us to all be on the same page of how much in this budget reflects non-recurring items, and then how does that impact the bottom line on the budget?
So I guess the most obvious non-recurring item is the $45 million that we received in connection with our MOU agreement with the state. And so we will get MOU funds in F-27, as we'll see, but it won't be that amount. In our operating expenses, I think that's something that we can pull out and pull together for you for a later review. I don't want to forget anything that's significant, and nothing is popping out to me right this second. So I think that's definitely a review that we can get to you for both F-26 and F-27.
And the 45, excuse me, the 45 million is reflected under the state appropriation line.
Yes.
And then on the strategic investments,
Yes. Yes.
how are we going to measure the return on these investments and what particular areas they're driving as part of the university strategy?
Yes. So for investments around enrollment, that one has a more natural KPI associated with it. Are we hitting our enrollment target for F-27? Are we communicating in a way with students that is consistent, that can build our pipeline, which when we look at our F-27 enrollment, I think absolutely highlights that we are. Around the business and finance investments, I think and we'll see this when we talk about, when we see the slide on external strategic consultants. A lot of this investment that you see on the screen for F-26 was around stability and stabilizing some of our business and finance functions. And so I would, from a qualitative standpoint, the fact that we are now moving forward to be able to train, rehire, stand more independently on our own, you'll see the reduction in our reliance on these consultants for key business and finance functions. To me, that communicates that we've gotten our return on our investment to stabilize kind of for 18 months, and now the university is moving ahead to own its own functionality.
Okay, thank you. And one last
Yes.
question. Trustee Qualls, you had something?
It's on that slide, if you don't mind.
Yep, go ahead.
Was there an increase in enrollment? Because I thought it was $800,000 strategic investment. Was there an increase, President or CFO?
$800,000 for
Strategic investment in enrollment from previous meetings.
previous meetings, more like previous. This is
So
compared.
previous our board meeting, so last meeting material that we got when there was a report on strategic investments, has that number increased?
I don't think so, unless I'm not following exactly.
I don't think we used it for at the beginning of it. We're anticipating maybe spending 800,000 for enrollment. I'm not sure if we used all of that, but
Yes, this is because the top line is for salaries, and those kind of match 1-to-1, and then the operating expense. And again, this is net of what was already invested, so this is incremental. So maybe if I can review.
Could it have been related to the technology investment? Because we did spend more money on the system for recruitment and enrollment.
You said more?
We did. So I think that was a part of it. That's
You
the
mean
way I
slate?
took this.
slate.
what we're
That's what
talking-
you're
okay.
talking about. Slate.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I
Investment
think
for undergrad
that larger
and grad.
number was
Yes.
inclusive of that technology investment.
Yes, I'll go back and look at the document.
Okay.
But I remember when Jim wrote the document, there was some bad guys, or it was $800,000. But I was just asking if this was an additional $100,000 or so in addition to that 800,000 that was already allocated.
I don't think it's in addition to.
My last question
Yes.
for this part, and it'll bleed over into 27. How much of our Title III funds do we use to supplement any activities or personnel that we otherwise would have been using E&G for?
Do you mind we hold that there is a slide related to our key external consultants that has it broken out with unrestricted and restricted?
That's the consultants, but are we supporting any other personnel or activities off of our Title III? What's the percentage that we utilize Title III in FY26? And I'll hold 27 until you get to it.
Yes, so all of the personnel that are related to Title III are conducting Title III activities. I want to make sure I understand your question.
Title III capacity building, there are times that some use Title III funds to support personnel. I'm just asking if we're using any of our Title III dollars to support personnel, not the Title III workers, but anyone across the university.
Some of that review is ongoing. I would say that the short answer to that is probably yes. We are conducting now with the committee to make sure that that is cleaned up. One of the things around our Title III activities is making sure, independent of where activities are funded, that they all align to our strategic vision for the university. And right now, I would probably describe that as misaligned.
Any additional questions? Trustee Smith Knight.
Very quick question. So the TBR staff for finance and accounting, were we able to finally fill all of those expected roles?
In process. So you'll see, I don't know if it specifically calls it out, but for F27, we're only anticipating having those resources through the end of September. And so right now, we're starting the hiring and ramp up process for those.
Any additional questions? Any questions from anybody on the phone? Okay, April.
F27 proposed budget. So here, just wanted to start with an overall kind of mission statement around how we built this proposed budget. So this budget accomplishes budget accuracy, but it also does that with an asterisk. It does that keeping in mind that our cash flow management is our most important priority. And so what that means is where there are any contingencies, some of the worst case maximum exposure expenses that we could have, we went ahead and layered them into the budget. As a university that currently has no to very minimum reserves, it's important for us to be able to manage those contingencies inside the budget that we have. Because if something, significant comes up, we don't really have a cash place that we can go and access quickly. And so that's what you'll see in many of the components where we are conservative when it comes to layering in additional expected revenue or anticipated revenue, but taking the perspective of we'll layer in the expenses and not layer in any increases in revenue beyond ones that we can absolutely count on right now. So our F-27 budget represents a 1,200 freshman class. As we all know, around here, around the table, the F-26 number is about 457. And so we'll look at where we are projected to land. It also takes into account a significant reduction around personnel. We've talked about the VSP impact, which we'll layer in, and also some other layers that we know we need to manage in order to keep us on track. This is probably the best slide in this entire deck, especially if you consider where we currently finished this fall enrollment. So right now enrollment is projected. We have 162, and I think it may be even more over the last few days of confirmed freshmen, which means they have paid their 100%, $100 deposit for confirmation of enrollment. And that also is a new gate, right? So when we think about where we were last year, paying that $100 was not a requirement as a gate or a step in your enrollment. So that blue shaded area is what the enrollment team continues to focus on, because we know we need to give ourselves cushion to make sure we can absorb any melt, both from students not actually showing up on campus and for those that may not make it through the purge process. And so all of those are being considered here and making sure we're on track. This number also coincides with a number that we're seeing in both enrollment in new student orientation, which is again another step in the confirmation that these students will actually step foot on campus, as well as housing enrollment. So this is definitely news to be excited about. And I think it is relevant to our discussion around value proposition, because for a university to be able to go from 400 something odd students in freshman year and the next year be in the space where we can potentially triple that or more, I think that communicated to us that our demand is strong, and the negative impact of our financial situation, of our financial instability last summer significantly impacted our ability to allow students and their parents the confidence that it takes to send your child here. So I think we're going in the right direction, and obviously, as we've talked about, can continue to drive the value proposition message.
And there's about another, I think, 165 freshmen that are transferring to Tennessee State on top of that number.
Yes, this does not include transfers.
Ms. Robinson, do you know if the academic profile has changed for the students from our previous years?
And I am pretty sure that what was presented in the academic shows that we are just ahead, both from a cumulative GPA and from a test score standpoint of our freshman class last year. I don't want to speak out of turn for enrollment, but
That's what was said
Okay.
last week.
And the second part to the question is, do these students have they been packaged, financial aid? Do they have any idea so that we'll know, yes, they're going to be able to be here, or we may need to find some other options?
Yes, I have that number. About 74% of them have already been packaged.
74% of the 1,200.
Of the confirmed, of the 1662.
16.
Well, just to take a point of personal privilege now that Trustee Trauber is back, I want to just say that the amount of work and effort that has gone into getting this enrollment up is so tremendous and a testament to everything that we are all sitting around this table to do, and that's ensure that students have the best access to education at Tennessee State University. So thank you all for all of the work that's been done on that, and I can't say that enough. Not you, though.
I had nothing to do with it. But I think I was good for about 500 students. We'll let Eric talk about that.
These are our personnel cost trends starting from 2021 through 2027. So again, we put this slide in here to keep ourselves honest around the continued work that we have to do in order to reduce our operational structure, right? The money that it costs for us to operate this institution, and being able to consider our drop in enrollment to be able to reflect an operational structure that is where we are to date. I think that this represents the university trending in the right direction. The VSP is back on here, but this time the most relevant number to F27 is the 4.8 million of estimated savings, which is what is reflected in the budget. So this is one that the university administration continues to talk through. So this is comparing the $12.2 million estimated savings that were reflected in our pro forma numbers against the actual savings, which was the 4.8 that I just mentioned. And so that leaves what I'll call a gap of 7.4. And so that remaining gap, all of those kind of levers that you see on the screen are the ones that the university is actively managing in order to close that $7.4 million gap in F27. So said very straightforwardly, the number that you see in personnel costs is reflective of the university between now and the end of F27 being able to close that gap. And these are all proportionate. So where we can get, and what is not on here is revenue, right? And I said that it was intentional for us to take a conservative approach, but where we can earn more revenue also reduces our need to have to close this gap, because ultimately we're managing to our bottom line number. So whether it comes from increase revenue or reduce costs, these are all top of mind for the university to make sure we're managing over the next 12 months. Here is our presentation of our external strategic consultants, and we want to make sure that we designated this as such and just didn't say our third party vendors, because the university has much more than these. But these are our kind of enterprise wide external strategic consultants, and it's separated by the actual consultant as well as whether it's funded from restricted or unrestricted funds, restricted being Title III funds specifically. One of I think the biggest, and then at the bottom, you have some of the deliverables and KPIs that are associated with these funds. What I think is the biggest call out on this slide that I started to mention earlier is if you look at F26, which is this current year, and look at our $8.1 million spent, That's why I would describe it as stabilization. These are funds that were invested to help us stabilize our own functions, for us to be able to find the capabilities and the talent needed in order to go forward. Because then if you look at F-27 and what we're planning to have in that budget, for what we have in our budget for those same stabilization services, it's significantly reduced. And that was always the plan, for this not to be a long-term solution for the university, but for us to be able to stabilize ourselves and then move forward. And even if you look at the F-27 budget, a significant part of that are still related to one-off or non-operational needs. So the SIG amount that's in restricted is related to our enterprise-wide system migration, right? That is not a recurring function in any of our operational structure. Also, the Hyatt Brown is related to our real estate potential handlings. And so if you exclude that, we're really talking about, relatively speaking, a small amount that's being invested in F-27, because we're really looking to move forward with our own personnel. We have, so for Hyatt Brown, for F-27, there is $1 million that is included in our budget, that is from E&G funds. And so this slide just shows the deliverables and potential for the university to have to spend these funds. This is an hourly KPI deliverable contract. So this is a specific space where our budget reflects a higher end of our maximum exposure, to make sure we can plan for it from a cash flow standpoint. But these are still all, think about it like a menu of things that we may have to invest if we decide to go forward with any of these services. We included our TSU athletics budget detail here because it's when we talk about non-personnel and operational, it's a big part of our budget. So just wanted to add some transparency here around our individual sports, both revenue and expense, and to allow you to compare it to where we are. And so it's one of the things that is a part of our DNA and our value proposition. And so even while making sure we're stabilizing ourselves, we're being responsible around our budget, athletics is a space that the university understands fully, that it needs to make sure that it's funding, and I think we're doing that adequately.
Can I just ask
Yes.
a question? I know we've spent some time talking about athletics, but in terms of the other revenue producing departments, where does athletics fit in terms of, so if you had to pick, I would suspect ag is the number one, right? By far. But if you had to, I'm just trying to reconcile, like in terms of priority, where does athletics fall in terms of what we have to be thinking about?
It would be at the top.
Okay.
Trying to think of something that would be, because athletics has the additional value of qualitative and marketing piece, I would put it at the top.
Okay. But in terms of its the amount of funds that it brings in today.
Our Aramark would be the money that we make on our meal plans would be up there. I'm trying to think of something else.
You
in
don't
our
have to think of it off the
auxiliary.
top of your head. I'm just
And I
to
can-
put in frame of mind, so that just so I can get a better understanding of.
It is one of the top.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful.
But to that point, a couple of
maybe 2 years ago, we were asking for somewhat of a breakout by departments that would be very helpful for us to see
Okay.
at some point.
Of the auxiliary?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then on this slide, I have just a very quick question.
Sure.
Based on kind of what we know and all that has happened in this year, why are we expecting our ticket sales to go down for football and for basketball compared to the estimated budget?
Oh, I can't see, sorry. And this may have been one where there's a few things that's in this line item. I think our assumption across the board was just to leave it flat. So that it may be impacted by something else. We can get that provided to you of what's driving that. But our overall assumption was to leave the revenue flat, layer in all of the expenses that we know that we have, the increasing expenses, and not layer in any of the increased revenue. But it should be flat though. Anybody else?
Yes.
Yes.
So while we're on athletics and the FY27 budget, first want to acknowledge that I know A.D. Allen is not here, but acknowledging that we have opted in to the settlement, which is a really strong strategic decision for the university. Are any of the financial impacts of that decision incorporated into this budget?
No, it's not.
Okay. The second part then is, how does the university plan to operationalize or administer any of those athletic revenue sharing obligations? Are we utilizing our current staff, or is that going to require that we bring on additional staff? Are we going to do a collective, a third party? Have you all been able to think through that part?
I would honestly call that in progress. So it's something that is being discussed with myself, the president, and obviously the athletic director, which we are planning a a longer meeting to operationalize those things.
But in terms of any financial impact that it would have on the budget, will you have that ready before we approve the FY27 budget?
Potentially. I'll put that as something that in operationalizing the policies that we prioritize anything that will be, I'm slowing down because I'm thinking about what those items would be.
It's
And we
okay if
should
you don't
have a
have them
view
right now.
on that.
Yeah.
Yes, we should have a view on that before we meet again for you to vote. Here are the proposed strategic investments for F27. We've talked about athletics, business and finance. Again, retaining some of the continued support through September, and then others that will be ongoing for functions like financial aid. We also have an investment in institutional advancement, as well as I am blind. As well as the president's office. Any questions on the strategic investments? Okay. And then that concludes the look at F27. The next two were just a look at our continued cash management. This continues to be something that is top of mind for the university, making sure we're managing that bottom light blue line to make sure we have cash and funds available to cover the obligations and requirements. You'll see that July 1st, that's where the MOU funds for F27 will be received by the university. And we included this slide as our TSU composite financial index. So these are individual ratios that build to a larger composite score that is that TSU has, and it's benchmark against our peers. If you look at the board materials, the actual full 2 pages of the other LGIs is included in the appendix. So here we just wanted to highlight where TSU is. Again, this is for FY25. And when we have the FY26 annualized numbers, we will surely update them. A couple of things to call out. We can walk down the four individual components of the full composite score. But what you see on the screen is the actual, that's first, that's TSU's number. And then the second is a standard, which is based on where the other LGIs are. And then you have a watch number, which includes once your ratio starts to get in this realm, that it's something that the university needs to keep a close eye on. So one, when we talk about primary reserves, the first one, I hope would be no surprise to anyone. We are under the watch number significantly. And again, just going back to the reality of being a university that has no to very little reserves, that was an expected outcome. And so making sure that we are not only covering the obligations that we have now, but also trying to carve out room that we can add to a reserve. And then each one, we have what the ratio means and how it builds. And so there are ones that we are above. So the last one, that, oh no, it's the return on, that's what I want. The return on net assets. I thought this one was probably one of the biggest call outs on the page, because what's in parentheses is simply, it's an indicator of whether the university is better off than the year before. And so if you look at that, we are above the standard. And so again, using each metric as an assessment point for us and the decisions that are being made. And so all of that builds to our composite score that's on the side, which is a 1.45. And then you can see that the standard is 3. So certainly still work to continue to be done, but that return on net assets means that for the decisions and the resources that we have, that the university is moving in the right direction. And again, the full comparisons of the LGIs are in the appendix of these materials. And then lastly, it's just an update on our overall pro forma. So the first one is the pro forma that was presented in February 2025 that excluded the state appropriations. And then if you move to the updated pro forma that reflects the $96 million that was agreed to by the state, this is what this forecast represents. And so then on the next 2 slides, we're trying to measure ourselves against the true starting point. So our baseline pro forma versus the estimated. And again, as a reminder, the baseline did not include for this year, the $45 million that we received. So if I were looking at this, I would immediately go to the variance number and see if the baseline pro forma does not include the $45 million. How close are we to a variance that says $45 million? And we are right in the ballpark of where we should be. And that is being in the ballpark again with a significant freshman miss on enrollment. And so you can see we have a gap in our revenue expectations, but we made it up on the areas where the university has really had levers around our operating expenses. So I think this is a really good indicator, again, that the university is going in the right direction. Still more work to do, but definitely making the decisions that need to be made. And again, on F27, baseline pro forma versus our proposed budget. This one, the baseline number does not have the $25 million that we are expecting to receive for state appropriations for the MOU this year. And so same question applies. Where are we? Where does that variance number land relative to the $25 million that we know that's not in there. And this one shows that we are planning to outperform our MOU commitment. And now, admittedly, it's just a hair, right? But again, making sure that our budget reflects the commitment that we've made in order for us to keep receiving the stabilizing funds that we know we need in order for the turnaround to happen. And that's it. Any questions on the pro forma or anything?
Looks like none. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, excuse me. The next item on the agenda is the report on institutional advancement. The materials for this agenda item are in your materials for the committee meeting. And Ms. Eloise Alexis will provide the information in connection with this agenda item. This is an informational discussion item only, so no vote will be required.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All. I will jump right in. It's an honor to be here to provide an update on institutional advancement. On the slides here. We'll begin with our fundraising summary. As of the submitting of this report, which was April 17th, we had received and receipted just over $5.5 million in philanthropic fundraising. That's about a $1.5 million increase over the last report to this board. And this report is about a $300,000 increase over the total giving if we compare to the amount that we had received during this period last year. It also represents gifts from just over 2,500 donors. And while that's about 500 donors fewer than the same period last year, it represents a larger average gift per donor. To date, it's important to note that we've also received about 1.6 million in new grant awards and notifications. And so these pledges, while not reflected in this fundraising report, some will be realized before the end of the fiscal year and into the next fiscal year. This report gives our gifts by category. I won't go by each line, but just where there are noticeable decreases or increases. And our capital giving down just over $100,000, and that reflects some one-time capital improvement gifts that were made in the prior fiscal year that were not required or received this year. In our restricted programs, we are up about $500,000, reflects some corporate investments into some of our programs, particularly in our colleges and schools. And we are down just over $100,000 in unrestricted operating, which is reflecting some increased interest in gifts that have been restricted for either scholarships or programs. We've been intentional, as you may know, and we will be intentional about talking about the value of unrestricted giving as we move into the next fiscal year and into our campaign fundraising. The next slide focuses on our year-to-date comparison by donor count. Of course, we've been talking about and we've been closing the gap, if you will, particularly in the category around alumni. And we'll talk a little more about our conversation around alumni giving, but we've been enlisting a number of fiscal year end strategies to increase the numbers of donors. And so we are down now about 283 over where we were this time last year. But the last report we gave to this board, we were over 400 down. So we are, again, closing that gap. And you'll hear about some of the things that we've been doing in order to do that. We continue focused on the priorities around building a culture of significant and sustainable involvement and giving to TSU. I won't touch on all of these things, but it really reflects under building relationships, some of the listening and learning that we've been doing. As we do this, we've been meeting, as you see, traveling, or having people, inviting people to campus to join us for various conversations. And as part of this, it's also been helping us test some of the things that we've been doing. One example is often before or after we meet with some of the individuals here, we've been sharing their profiles with them in our new alumni database in Razor's Edge. It allows people to experience the new platform. They can go on, they can look at their own record, they can update their record if their addresses are incorrect, and they can get a sense of their giving history as well. I believe this board has had the opportunity through our foundation partner, Laren Walker, to experience that as well. If you have not, we can send your profile to you and give you an opportunity to take a look at it. I won't delve into our will, actually as a authentic part of the remainder of the report, we'll touch on some of these things, but I really want to go to the last bullet around securing new skilled staff resources. Just to share that we, as of mid-April, added 2 new members to the institutional advancement team, 1 an advancement operations manager. We're already seeing that focus on accurate and more timely responses, being more proactive in our outreach, and really taking a look at our policies, procedures, both with our internal and external constituents. Also added an annual giving director who has come to us with experience in Razor's Edge configuration and reporting. And so already doing a deep dive into how the information that came over from Banner, how it is configured, if you will, in Razor's Edge, and then doing the audit on our gift reporting processes, all of those things. So that is happening. Troubleshooting, et cetera, being more intentional about segmenting in our reports and the information that we are reporting. These next few slides give life to some of the work that we've been doing. One of the things we've been looking at is having more strategic opportunities to expand on the ways in which we celebrate and encourage giving. This was a wonderful partnership. One of our Greek letter affinity chapters, Beta Omicron, suggested that as part of their new member intake, it's often known as probate shows, that they made a gift. Once that gift was received, we were able to do a check presentation so that not only our alums and families and friends, but students who were packed in that place could see and understand the value of giving back. Another is TSU was one of 4 HBCUs selected to receive a $500,000 matching gift to establish an endowed professorship in sustainability. This gift was a collaboration between UNCF, Thurgood Marshall College Fund, Inroads, and the Southern Company. And those who know, there are alums, particularly at Southern Company, who were part of this process. And so we're grateful for this opportunity as well. We also partnered with the TSU Foundation to take advantage of the opportunity and the excitement around TSU's NCAA tourney berth. And so we put together some appeals that went out. And not only is it just an opportunity to take advantage of the feel-good moments, but also for us to really test some of the things that are out there. So when and if you get a chance to take a look at the deep dive, we do performance metrics on every appeal that we send out. And so we notice things like bounce backs, right, which lets us know that we have work to do around cleaning up our data, and the conversion to Razor's Edge is going to allow us to do that. We also look at things like how many new donors does an appeal bring in? How many people do we retain? How many people can we bring back? One of the things we know is that from EAB, which is one of the academic research entities, that it takes eight or more touch points are needed to make a never donor a donor. And so this is one of those touch points. So we will be testing and looking at information with these and other kinds of solicitations. We also had a number of engagement moments that are ongoing. Of course, alumni relations is in our umbrella, and so the spring game provided an opportunity for alumni to come home. We had some really unique opportunities to just sit under the tent and talk to some of our affinity chapters, whether it was the Untouchables or the Tiger Den, to really hear what is out there around the university, people's affinity, giving, all of those things, and engagement. We also partnered with operations and others to have a groundbreaking for our new engineering building. And I think the only thing more beautiful than the day itself was the excitement among our students, faculty, staff, our alumni, and others who were present around the opportunity to have a new space for academic learning and gathering. And we also hosted the same weekend as commencement, we hosted a reunion. So our vintagers, those alumni celebrating 40 or more years since their graduation and classes ending in ones and six came back. And so we had a host of wonderful activities, whether it was our TSU historian professor putting on a campus tour where he took them through both of our campuses, and we went through North Nashville and talked about TSU's connectedness to the community, or whether we were doing a Soul Train night and having fun. But we culminated with a jazz brunch where our reunioners presented their gifts to the institution. And I'm happy to report that this year's reunioners raised the bar on giving. They gave over $500,000, $550,000 come in to date. They have until June 30th. And in fact, a member of the class of 56 sent their son this morning into the office to give us another 5-figure gift. And so we're continuing to tally, but we are pleased that from our 50-year class and others, they have raised the bar on giving more than our classes gave even last year. There were a number of recognitions as well, and one of the things we're continuing to look at is consistent giving. And so I want to honor that one of our reunioners, Judge Collier, has given to TSU 29 consecutive years. And so we're beginning to celebrate not only dollars, but donors and consistency. We are making progress, significant progress in our focus on reimagining the alumni giving model. We'll continue this focus through June 30th. And after consensus is achieved, there's a task force that is guiding us in what our next steps will be. Once consensus is done, we're looking forward to sitting down with the foundation and seeking their approval on how to manage the flow of resources into the foundation as our task force and others will be recommending. These next slides really talk through how our task force, and I'll remind you that our task force was comprised of chapter leaders, regional leaders, and national leaders of our association who volunteered to guide this process. And they have done great due diligence in that. So they've been using historical data like that you see here. Questions and other assumptions, looking at some guiding principles to determine and make a recommendation about what it would look like for us to remove the dues requirement, consolidate under a single 501c3, all funds raised in the name of the university coming to the university, or as they call it, pay the university first, and what would be required to really work together in our engagement opportunities. And so that work continues. There is a timeline for that, and where we are currently is, of course, again, you heard me say the task force has done great due diligence. As they begin to come forward again with the recommendations, and we vet those with our partners, we will look to utilize the time beginning in July to really test some of the assumptions and recommendations that come forth from our task force. We continue to think about fundraising and reimagine as we talk about our campaign, transparency, trust, and transformation of what we're hearing from our constituents that will be required to undergird our work. And so we are focused on those things. As we think about the opportunity to raise $100 million focused on increasing student experiences and campus infrastructure. will be our focus. We continue to again think about what that timeline looks like. We are in the process improvement moment. We know that our alumni giving model is part of that, but also just the identification of other opportunities to engage both internal and external constituents in the campaign. So we will use this summer to test our messaging, to begin to talk about the campaign publicly, and to begin to engage those who are interested in investing in TSU. We mentioned an advisory board that the president had put together, and so we are pleased that that advisory board has now come together. They met last month, and there was great conversation about opportunities to engage the broader community around the TSU value proposition, as we talked about. So you see those individuals to date who have been engaged. And of course, we always end by looking to the leadership here to continue to do what you're doing as a board call to action as you think about your own philanthropic goals and values and how the institution and all of our ecosystem of constituents can work together to make sure that TSU has the resources it needs to go into the future. Unless there are questions for me, that concludes the institutional advancement report.
Are there any questions?
I
All right,
appreciate
thank
you.
you. The next item on the, excuse me, the next item on the agenda are construction updates. The materials for this agenda item are included for review in the materials for this committee meeting. Mr. Will Rafford, Associate Vice President of excuse me, Campus Operations and Planning, Design, and Construction, it's a long title, will provide information in connection with this agenda item. This is an informational discussion item only, so no vote is required. And I turn it over to you, Mr. Rafford.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you, Chair, Vice Chair, Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Did we lose the audio?
No, there's just a couple of seconds, but while you wait, I hope you can tell from just riding through campus that although this is still a challenging time for TSU, it is also an exciting time for TSU. And the ability to see cranes on campus, much like cranes in the city of Nashville, it is something that helps students connect with TSU being a part of the development and growth, that so that as Nashville grows, so is TSU growing. And we're excited about sharing these updates, and we'll speak clearly. This is just a brief overview and highlight of the 20 plus projects that are occurring on campus. In the state of Tennessee, those projects are really structured around three things, one being new construction, one being major maintenance, and another one being minor maintenance. So as the presentation is uploaded, I'll be happy to share those with you and then take any questions at the end before moving to the master plan amendment action.
Do you, do all of these construction updates have to go through the SBC? I was just trying to give you some time, but now the presentation's up, so you can move on.
I appreciate the question. No, they don't. I've spoke to those three different classes, so that it be clear, anything that's less than $1 million that is categorized as major maintenance or minor maintenance can be handled locally. It will be disclosed through the state architect and described to the SBC if it's on the consent agenda. But the SBC approval is really conditioned on it being a new improvement, a capital project to the campus, and then it being funded in a specific way above $1 million.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just a overview of how I like to approach this. One is a snapshot of our campus. Two is charting the path forward, breaking new ground, revitalizing our spaces, which is a model of how renovation will be done under current leadership versus previous leadership. Lastly, powering progress, and then looking ahead. And then, so a snapshot of our campus. This map shows all of the main campus, and sometimes it's difficult to get it in one shot, and it's not really easy to see from here, but in your packet, you'll be able to see that there are 21 active projects on campus right now. And these range from demolition projects to the central utility plant of steam and chilled water, to the ag project, which is apparent at the corner of Walter S. Davis and Schrader Lane, but then also into 5 other ag projects that are being designed around expanding research, be it the organic lab, the hay shed barn, as well as the broiler house, which again is a glorified name for a chicken coop. But it is part of what makes TSU interesting and makes agriculture one of the leading edges of Tennessee State. Many of you know the primary electrical upgrade project is $59 million, and that started 2 years ago and was set to conclude this year. We do have more time in that project, but it provides energy resilience for TSU and the failures that were experienced in 2021. This project is designed to ensure that never happens again on this campus, and students would not be exposed to the conditions that push them into hotels in that immediate situation. I've included this slide as a way of clarifying that everything on the state level is a cycle, and typically it's a 4-year cycle. So as you think about the projects that you're seeing now, that was 2022 and 23 work. Sometimes when we're working hard and we already have money, we can cut the 4 years to 2, possibly 3 years. But in no case do we start planning work assuming it'll happen less than 4 years. And that's important because that means the things that we're contemplating today, at best, they can be delivered in 2030. And that is not determined by the size of the team, the amount of money invested. It's really the way the state has structured the process, which is designed to make sure you study it in 1 year, you present it in 1 year, it's approved. The next year, after being approved, it's funded. After it's funded, you begin the design and the construction, and that's a 2-year process at best. And so I like for people to see this to understand what we are up against, because as we think about the competitive advantage of a physical institution, we right now need 27 increases, 28 increases, and 29, which means that we have to work together to do that in a more expedited way.
While you're on that one, could you go through the example? Let's say we had $100 million and we raised them, and it's in the bank right now, and it's our money, and we want to build dorms with that. How does that fit in the timeline?
Yeah. So that the having money right now limits you to possibly year 3 and 4 left, but it doesn't negate the second and the right where you see the dollar sign at year 2 is really where it helps you. So if it takes 2 years to raise the money, then even the day you get the money, you still have a 2-year timeline before you could actively expect the return on what that money is designed to create. And that's important because donors like to see immediate action. And because of that, what you'll see in the next action in terms of the master plan amendment is our office working to prepare TSU to constrict this timeline where possible so that as we bring in new funds, we are already shelf ready and prepared to deploy projects that can move forward as much as possible in an earlier timeline. Thank you for the question. This is highlighting the engineering building. Many of you know this project was initially funded in 2021, and it was designed to go where Torrance Hall is, but it, as a course of studying other opportunities, moved to where Clay Hall formerly was. But this groundbreaking ceremony highlights a real opportunity for Tennessee State University to revive the engineering program that has been in my, I'm actually a product of the program, but it's been one of those strong programs at TSU that drive recruitment and some of the investment from industry across the campus. So we look forward to industry partners, now that this is real and it's happening and the groundbreaking has happened, industry partners coming alongside TSU to support in the donation of equipment and funding to help make the labs more like real world scenarios. And that's an exciting part of what we did on April 21st at this campus. Here's
I have a question on
sorry.
that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
70,000 square feet for an engineering building in 2026. As you think about expanding and the expansion of STEM and all of the engineering aspects, how many engineering tracks do we have?
Electrical, civil, mechanical, architectural, and then AIT is also included, as well as engineering, computer science.
And besides computer science, but will all of those disciplines be housed in that facility?
That is correct. Computer science will primarily live next door in McCord. This is the first building, and we located it here with the anticipation of, as the program grows beyond the 1,129 students that's designed around, that we would then be able to go across the mall behind it with the demolition of Clement Hall, provide space for the second version of this, of the engineering technology and sort of STEM center. So, point well taken is something we anticipated initially. There were two buildings planned, of which building one was funded. We had building one designed as a freshman and sophomore year experience. As the funding was constricted and we had other challenges, we revisited this to ensure that this building gave the 4 year experience in as many disciplines as possible. And so we are fairly excited that at 600 to 700 students right now and growth for up to 1,129 students, that is sized for the next 3 to 5 years at TSU, which is the same time we'll enact a new master plan, which will codify what we just described in terms of building two. Any other question? No problem. Thank you. Now onto the agriculture building. This 110,000 square foot building is much larger in real life than it looked on paper, but we're excited because it helps what some thought to be the back of campus have a new approach for Tennessee State University. And once you pass Ted Rhodes Golf Course, we're also working with the contractor to mow down some of the brush that prevents you from seeing it, but to help TSU's visual reach closer to what is DB Todd and Charlotte Pike, so that you'll see. I'm not sorry, Clarksville Pike, so that you'll see it as you approach from the edge of Tennessee State University. But this building is designed heavily around research in the plant and environmental science space, as well as the food and animal science space. We did a beam signing there last week, which was a huge success, and I think some of you may have seen it on social media, because those are types of media plays that help people see TSU is building for the future, and that the past, while it's still relevant, our future is bright as it relates to new construction and the things that are being invested in. This is that ag roller house. Tornado damaged this back in 21, and so after working with insurance and the state process, we were able to secure the funds and design the replacement of more resilient structures that will help that research get back underway. And many institutions do conventional research. Our institution is pushed toward the organic research, and so we've designed this facility to exist on the opposite side of what's traditionally the farm. So on the left of Walter S. Davis is conventional. On the right is an organic research facility that's designed to have pretty much self-contained classroom as well as lab space, and then the fields that they will do their testing in. Going back to this map just to show that everything we just covered is really north of Walter S. Davis and on the left. But now as we go into the renovation of spaces, you know, Davis Hall is the first example of a renovation project while I've been here. And sometimes you design to the money that you have, but in this project, we wanted to look at how do you take and increase the useful life of a building for a full 30 plus years. So not just designing to the money, but trying to be very deliberate about all the building systems that are required, the classroom components, the advanced technology that's available for higher ed right now. So our institution, Davis Hall, will reflect that, and we want this to be the standard for renovation of any structure on campus. And we're excited to work with HORE on this project, and then the Emerging Leaders are a group of students that you've met here before, and they are integral to this process in helping students stay connected to the existing renovation. This is a third floor, and it's really designed so the students don't just transact with the building, but find places to camp out in the building. And some of our transient students will be able to have a place in the learning environment to spend the majority of the day. This is Pogue Auditorium. There are some really detailed items designed here that change the ADA accessibility of the space, as well as help it have a more grand approach with newer technology. And then this is back to the classrooms and somewhat classrooms being convertible, but also having increased technology. So on the left, you'd see the before, and on the right, you'll see the after. Same here in terms of before on the left and right on, is the after of what the upper deck of the auditorium will look like from the hallway approach. And then this is what used to be the IT center, but will now be more like a lobby of an Apple store, so that as students are looking for help with their Wi-Fi and computer needs, that this space has been designed to be more interactive. So not just the transaction of dropping off your laptop or asking a question, but having a space to work and get the support needed to solve your problem as you get back in your dorm and even possibly help other students. So this was done with the support of our new COO with his IT background, and it expands the offering for TSU students. And so this is that $59 million. And so the blue loop is the southern loop and the green is the northern loop. And so where you see the blue and green squares, those are our connections to NES. So in the past, TSU only had one NES connection, which meant that if it went down, then the campus went down. What this project does is create redundancy. So if it goes down in the north, we can feed it from the south. If it goes down in the south, we can feed it from the north. And so it is not widely known, but in early April, we came in on a Monday. The power had an electrical surge on Sunday, and half of the campus was out. And so having this type of infrastructure will make the work that we had to do that day a lot easier, where we deployed generators. And thanks to the new CFO and forward thinking, she had funded us having those generators on campus. And so we were able to deploy and solve that problem. But in the near future, we'll have that redundancy buried in the ground. And you also see that those pink boxes, which are roughly 12 by 8 foot vaults, are designed with conduit that will prepare TSU to run new fiber optic and whatever the next wave of technology is without digging the ground up again. So this is a strong project for TSU that prepares it on the electrical side and the IT and infrastructure side. So as it relates to construction updates, that's the summary of our new construction, the maintenance projects, and the things that we're doing. And if there are no questions, I'll move into the master plan amendment action.
Are there any questions on the construction updates? All right, thank you, Mr. Rafford, for the construction updates. And you're ready to move into the master plan?
Yes.
And this is an action item for our finance committee.
And he's bringing up a visual.
While he's doing that, I have a question, if you don't mind, for Attorney Brown. What is our current governance with TBR?
Explain their question further, please.
When the Focus Act, most of the LGI severed completely from TBR, but we still had a small component. Are we still?
We're still in the current structure. We're still status quo. So there's specific things like when we're dealing with the construction related things, we still have that TBR overlay.
Is there a plan to completely sever, or are we happy with the partnership?
I can't speak to happiness with the partnership, but I can say that at this point we don't have plans to sever. That's just not something that's come up yet in terms of conversations with me. Whether there are other discussions that have taken place, I can't speak to those.
I'm happy to speak to it. So we do work with TBR and we work well with them at the present. Our approach is that building out our own infrastructure will be an investment. And at the appropriate time where TSU is in that position, I think we have laid the groundwork that makes that very possible. Very, very limited work is required is more funding. And where we are, and that's additional people, that's additional FTE, engineers, architects, programmatic people. So from a structural standpoint, TBR and TSU are working well to accomplish the objectives that are in front of TSU. And that's leads right into this 5-year stabilization plan. At the present, TSU's funding requires us to be thoughtful about how do we stabilize the institution even in this period. And so it'd be very different if we did have the 250 and we were deploying new projects consistently. But where we are now, I think our timing and our staffing align.
My question really more so pertained to oversight from TBR, when that would transfer to the Board of Trustees. So, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that part. So oversight, governance.
Yeah, I don't know that those are the same. I think that's quite different. So the institutions, and pardon me if I'm out of turn. Yeah, I think if there is no action that I'm going to take without the board's like oversight and engagement, and TBR doesn't usurp that. TBR is sort of an intermediary between the State Building Commission and TSU. But when they're out of the way, the board doesn't become the intermediary. It's just that we no longer have that level of um, management oversight. But the board's role would remain the same as outlined in the governance. TBR's presence or absence doesn't change that. And if there's a nuance to that question, I'm happy to listen more. But very clearly, TBR's absence, you won't you won't lose power or gain more power when TBR is not there. It's just that we'll go directly to the State Building Commission after achieving your approval, and not go to TBR with your approval. All right. Well, in front of you is a 5-year stabilization plan, and in your packet, and I'm not bringing the entire packet up on screen, you'll see the background information. So I'll do an overview of this as we move through it. So Tennessee State University's most recent master plan was adopted in 2016 and was scheduled to expire in this year, 2026. The Tennessee Higher Education Commission requires every institution to maintain a current campus master plan that's refreshed every decade. Anticipating the 2026 expiration, TSU's Planning, Design, and Construction, Tennessee Board of Regents, Dobrolitsky, Matthey, Woolpert Engineering, and a host of other consultants work together to prepare the plan that's in front of you. There are 5 consultants and 2 state stakeholders that contributed to this planned action. I've included in your package an overview of the consultant team and their roles. So Woolpert Engineering, as many of you know, was contracted to do the large master plan. That effort did not conclude. Dobrolitsky Matthey is a higher education planner. They came to meet with all the professors, deans, department heads, did interviews on their current roster, their current class needs, and their future projections. After Woolpert Engineering was exited, Bauer Askew took over the initiative to help TSU deliver the master plan amendment. And then DLR Group, which is another programming consultant, came in to help with what we call migration. So in between executing projects, you may have to relocate people. Many of you know College of Education was relocated from the main campus in Clay Hall to Avon Williams. DLR Group is the consultant who helps with those items. And then Gresham Smith in your packet is the MEP, or Mechanical, Electrical, and Plumbing Engineering firm, who helped to plan the loads of the mechanical and utility needs in these transitions. So if you're able, Sterling, can you just go from 0 through 6? So what's in front of you as a master plan amendment just captures the action that TSU, based on present funding, can afford to execute year after year from 2025 through 2030. And so each page represents a corresponding year and the efforts that we'd like to execute during those years. An example would be removing the dental school from Clement Hall to health sciences. And then armed with the information that's in your packet, which is this report, and this is the Dobrolitsky Matthews Space Planning Report, it helped us know that there is more than adequate space to do that kind of work. And so the plan that's in front of you is the result of, again, 5 consultants, 2 state stakeholders, and the Tennessee State University's team interviewing and talking with the staff on campus to determine how do we right-size the operational footprint of Tennessee State University, reducing our energy consumption, reducing the space needed to perform the academic offerings that are aligned with this season, and then to present that in a way that we can have your approval to execute it. I'll just say in the end, as you go through your package, I've answered the question about why this amendment was needed, and that primarily was around the reduction in the FTEs. So a master plan that was designed around 7 to 8,000 was adjusted once the enrollment in 2024 was shown to be on a different, on a declining scale, even at 5,000. And then I've answered who participated in this in terms of the consultants the state hired, that TSU worked with. And then lastly, I'll just overview the actions that are expected in this master plan amendment. 1 would be the demolition of Clay Hall. 2 is the future demolition of Crouch Hall in Queen, Washington. 3 is the new construction of a new engineering and technology building, agriculture, food and animal science, agriculture, environmental science, the renovation of Davis Hall, the renovation of the Love Resource Building, or LRC, and then the supporting migration and reuse strategy for buildings like McCord, Jackson Hall, and others that are designed to create higher efficiency. And I would like to preserve some of those details because they do impact programs that may not yet fully be described here. But with that being said, I'd love to entertain any questions that outline how the master plan amendment allows TSU to act in a period where its funding is limited and it is designed primarily to reduce its operational footprint and its energy consumption.
Are there any questions? Excuse me, are there any questions?
I just have a few. In terms of, so a couple of thoughts. One, you did mention that y'all spoke with THEC on this already, right?
Correct. THEC has reviewed and approved.
Okay. And then I guess I'm just trying to figure out in terms of the steps that you want from this board is this 5-year stabilization plan. Is it going to work in conjunction with a 10-year plan, or are you planning to come back to us with something beyond stabilization? I'm just trying to sequence where we're going.
Yeah, fair question. So a master plan amendment is just like a contract adjustment. So it's not the plan. It's just an adjustment to an existing plan that we can work on while we work on the full master plan. So the full master plan will be the result of strategic vision plan, an academic master plan, and then a full master plan would be created to deliver that academic master plan which supports that strategic vision plan. None of that action is anticipated in what's in front of you. What's in front of you is strictly what do we do while the CapEx dollars became OpEx dollars, and how does TSU help itself while it waits to stabilize? And it's by reducing the operational footprint and trying to conserve energy, taking buildings offline that should have been offline before. It's primarily those 3 actions in that order. And if TSU does that, then when the full 10-year master plan is there, when there is fundraising and funding there, you've already, for lack of a better term, cut the fat so that then you can move forward with that. But if you sit in this period and do nothing, then you stand the risk of slowing down the period when you actually do have funding to move forward.
And then I have one other question about you mentioned the fiber. Are we working in conjunction with any entities on that outside of TSU, or is it just we are setting ourselves up so that we can go out and talk to any of the other entities that are leading some of those things? I'm thinking about like Oracle or hell, even EPB in Chattanooga, that do a lot of this fiber work so that we are more equipped and more prepared as a university moving forward.
I'd say it's both and.
Okay.
Where the COO is working to advance technology. And then we certainly have completed, much of the infrastructure that will have us ready for the plan that he lays out.
Thank you.
I have just a process
Mhm.
question, and if the demolitions and repairs and some of them have already occurred, what are you asking this board to do? What are we?
Well, this is the ratification of the master plan amendment. So given that we are in year one, I'm asking this board to ratify what has happened and what is scheduled to happen over the remaining years.
Is is there a step in the process where we would have seen this beforehand and had an opportunity to do an approval versus a ratification?
And maybe let me interject because I think Chair Winton asked a good question about how this affects things going forward. And maybe Trustee Qualls, what you're asking is taking a step back, looking what maybe should have occurred or did not occur. Can you walk us through how this would typically look and where we are now and what the request of the board would be so we have the full picture of what's happened before, what we're being asked to do now? You already answered the question about prospectively how this affects things going forward.
Yeah, and maybe tie in to the letter that Johnson approved.
So just a brief timeline, and if you go into the back of your packet, on the next to last page, there's a timeline that just outlines the items that I will discuss right now. So in 2022, this action was initially anticipated for TSU, and it was anticipated when the Wolper contract was created. So that was before anyone in this room sitting in these chairs was here. And so once the contract with Wolper was progressed, it was clear that we paid for something with the anticipation that we get it, and we're not getting it from that consultant, and we're working with a different one. So at that time, this board was not in place, and the board and the previous leadership, their goal was presenting it to the president, approving it, the president, and that was the THEC requirement. So the THEC's requirement was we need the president to affirm this action, which is essential for TSU protecting its future. And it was under President Ronald Johnson that letter was executed and assigned and submitted to to THEC. And with that approval, it allowed us to do the actions that you're seeing on campus right now. Relocate the agriculture building, relocate the engineering building, demo Clay Hall, and advance these things that are providing for TSU's future. So in another world where this board was in place, I would say that before the 2022 action, then much like what's going to happen with the full 10-year master plan, that strategic vision is presented to you, that academic plan is presented to you, and then as a result of those two documents, a timeline is provided for when a master plan will be created. But going back to that 4-year slide, it takes 2 years to do a master plan. What is TSU doing in the 2 years while you're planning what you'll do for the next 10 years? That's what this was designed to answer. And it's one of the reasons THEC and President Johnson, in my opinion, and in some ways were forward thinking and saying, we cannot have TSU stuck on pause for 4 years. We have to provide a way for it to help heal itself in that period of time. So the past was designed around giving TSU a future while it reimagines its master plan. That is what I'm asking this board to ratify and continue. The actions necessary for us to continue to stabilize as we get the finances aligned and we prepare ourselves for the future. And please clarify if there's a more detailed or nuanced point that you'd like me to make or a different question.
Maybe Jeanette can weigh in around the fact that this was signed by Johnson, but it wasn't approved by the board. And at
Yes,
some point, you're going to see.
that's correct, sir. We went back and looked at past minutes and didn't find where this had previously been brought before the board. And so my guidance was that we should bring it to this board and present it to the board for ratification to make sure that we've followed the process that we should have followed originally.
Any other questions?
So for clarity, we're asking now to ratify so that the right way is what's on paper for what's going forward. Is that correct?
That's
Yes,
correct.
ma'am.
Okay.
And this, what we're reviewing today, it's status quo with what Interim President Johnson submitted and asked for approval that was approved by THEC.
Correct.
Was there any need to look back, since that's almost a 2-year period that's passed, was there a need to look back and review anything that may need changing now before we take up the approval of the master plan or the extension of the master
Yeah,
plan?
I'd say no. Keeping in mind it's a 4-year track to deliver what you had a plan for 2 years ago. So we are really, excuse me? Yeah, we're 2 years behind. So to some degree, I'm saying to you, there is no new data to study. We have the data, we have the study. We are advanced in there, and we just want to continue in that process to stabilize the university.
And just for clarity, and I think you answered this question before, but I want to make sure I understand and that there's nothing else that we're missing. I think one of the items you mentioned as a potential effect if we don't approve is that it slows down the process of what is already in flight.
That is correct.
And are there any other downsides or effects if this were not to be approved?
Only money. Only money.
Which matters.
Yes. I mean, I think it's important to keep in mind some consultants and 2 state stakeholders helped craft this plan for TSU. And while we're not describing it, but the flux of 3 different presidents were actually in place when this plan was put in place. So it's called the stabilization plan because at a period of time where a lot of things were not stable, this was us trying to answer what can be the continuous thread regardless of what is happening above us. And this answers that question from now to 2030, but it doesn't preclude us from now starting a plan that can change 27, 28, or 29. But it gave us a way forward. And at the end of it, it was around reducing energy, taking buildings offline that are costly to operate, and then helping TSU build a culture that is more in line with its most immediate future.
Is there further discussion?
Yeah,
Trustee
just
Qualls.
one other thing here, because I didn't see the appendix and all of the letters. So I'm looking at President Johnson's letter, and then there's a letter from President Tucker in 19 requesting an amendment to the map 2016. So what's the difference between Johnson's letter and President Tucker's letter for the amendment back in 25 to THEC?
You mean the letter from TIEC to President Tucker? So President Johnson, while he was here, initiated it. It was solidified after President Johnson was gone. It was written to the president, which is President Tucker.
So it took him a year to respond.
Quite.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any further discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion on this item.
I move to approve the stabilization plan as presented.
Is there a second?
And for point of clarification, the recommendation would be to recommend to the full board the approval since we're in committee today.
I move to recommend to the full board the ratification of the master plan amendment as contained in the materials for the May 14th, 2026 committee meeting. Is there a second? Is that what I'm supposed to say?
Seconded.
All right, Secretary Brown.
Thank you. Yes, Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Travert.
I'm going to abstain, but I'm only abstaining so I can have a little bit more time with the materials in the event this passes at this committee for the board meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Trustee Norfleet.
He is not available.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was on. Trustee Towns.
Yes.
All right. So, 2 yeses, 1 abstention, and 1 not present. The motion passes.
All right, thank you. All right, is there any additional business? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second it.
We'll just do a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, this meeting is adjourned at 3:17. Thank you.
The next meeting will start at 3:30. It's the audit committee meeting. So we'll take a short break.
May 14th, 2026 Audit Committee meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is 3:31 p.m. At this time, we need to call the roll. Board Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Trauber,
Here.
Trustee Smith Knight,
Here.
Trustee Qualls. Here. While present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to just jump right into our brief agenda today. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as contained in the materials for the May 14th, 2026 board meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We don't need any discussion? Nope.
Oh, you can, but I'm just saying we take
a vote. Okay. Then, is there any discussion on the agenda? All right, hearing none. The question is on the motion to approve the agenda as contained in the board materials for the May 16th board meeting. Secretary, please call the roll.
Yes, and I'll just take a voice vote. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, say yes.
Yes.
Great, the motion passes.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the February 19th, 2026 Audit Committee meeting minutes. Those meeting minutes were included for your review in the materials for this meeting. Is there a motion for the Audit Committee to recommend to the full board the approval of the February 19th, 2026 Audit Committee meeting minutes as contained in the materials for this meeting?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, the question is on the motion to approve the February 19th, 2026 Audit Committee meeting minutes as contained in the materials for the May 14th committee meeting. Secretary Brown?
Yes, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the report on internal and external audits. The materials for this agenda item are included for your review in the materials for the May 14th, 2026 committee meeting. I, the audit chair, will present the internal audit portion of the report, and Mrs. April Robinson, our CFO, will speak to the external audit portion, which was included in your committee materials. This is an informational discussion item, so no vote is required. Just to briefly update you, okay. I met with the former internal auditor to get an update on the audit plan for this fiscal period. So there were 4 items that were completed through this period, and just wanted to list those 4 items. And that is the financial audit for 2023. There was follow-up for the state that was completed. The state audit, also the triple E audit for the same period was completed. The review of president's expenses for FY 2025 was completed. And then the review of management's risk assessment was completed. Those were the 4 items that were completed on the audit plan this year. Questions on the audit plan update? All right, I'm going to turn this over then to April to give us her update.
The external audit report that you have in your materials starts just by giving an overview of the active audits that the team is currently managing. With being the most significant one is the FY 25 financial and compliance audit. The state is moving along well. One of the major call outs is that the state did provide us with 2 additional resources, and that is so that we could potentially hit our requested goal of being wrapped up by the end of May to allow us at least 30 days to be able to review findings and have those 30 days to remediate anything that's new that's not included in anything prior. We wanted to make sure that we have time to address before the start of a new fiscal year. Additionally, in your materials, you have a snapshot of, call it, the last 12 months of audit activity. That includes findings being delivered to the team, responses getting back to the state audit, new audits beginning. And if you really focus in on the last 6 months, it demonstrates a picture of the level of activity that the university has had around trying to balance all of these things while mitigating prior audits. But I think we're moving in a tremendous direction. Also, in your packet, you'll find each of both the current audits that we are in active corrective action periods and also those ones that we are voluntarily remediating. So you have the financial and compliance audits, including single audits and triple E findings from 2020 with the related remediation plans and actions and steps. The summary is summarized by business process, and then you can see the findings labeled in there. And that was just to give an overview of, not from an individual finding standpoint, but from a business process, and then where do our findings map. You'll also see in your materials that we have the management actions, which we are currently, the management letter items that we are currently remediating as well. And then lastly, there is a Office of the Inspector General that is being remediated. That one was one that we were not aware of, that was unresolved. Our controller received a communication from the auditor that in that FY21 audit, there were 13 recommendations / findings, and of those, 6 were still outstanding. And so we've incorporated that into our view. Like I said, that was one that was unknown to the current team. And so that's also being incorporated into our remediation plan. Go down a little more.
Yeah.
So this is just to recap on the timeline that was laid out of both my start as well as the controller start, and everything that's being balanced and managed, and still making some significant progress on our remediation. Go down. Here are the state audit findings, as well as the notes that align with the current actions that are being managed. You can keep going. And these are the state management letters. And just as a reminder, the management letter items are ones that were not deemed significant enough to make as into an official audit finding, but those things that are relevant to us overall operating a sufficient control environment. And those actions are included there. Okay, we can keep going. And then lastly are the OIG, unresolved corrective actions. So these are the ones that are left and outstanding from the total that were remediated before this current group. And that concludes my external audit report.
Thank you. It's been a minute since I've joined the weekly audit status meetings. Can you give us just a little insight into the progress for those and kind of, your experience with that relationship and how things are being produced to the auditors?
Yes, I think that our weekly audit meetings led by our controller has become a space that is more collaborative. So instead of us just receiving information, now I think the relationship with our audit team has evolved where we're proactively asking them for guidance, proactively pointing out opportunities like, hey, we did this, but we think we need to do a little more here. And I think the impact of that is us really getting findings, recommendations, and advice that moves us forward. As opposed to just assess where we've been and what we've done, but truly getting to a space where we can see a pathway to this university having a sustainable and effective control environment, which is something that's the foundation of our financial stability.
Can I,
Thank you.
can I add to that? I haven't made quite a few of those. I've missed quite a few rather. And today I logged on and Michael said, hey, can I just talk a few minutes about the progress that's being made? And he was very complimentary of Julie. He was very complimentary of the timeliness and responsiveness to those outstanding items. And he said, hey, it's a much different process. And I said, hey, thank you very much.
Good.
Now, can
This-
you go ahead and finish that up in the next
Right,
month?
that's right.
But anyway,
And
he's
this
very
Michael-
complimentary.
Michael Campbell,
Mike.
director of
Mhm.
thank you. I
Mhm.
just want to point that out, not just any old Michael. Right. That's important. Any other questions on these items? Anything else we need to be aware of? Thank you
No.
for putting this together. I know you can't really make audit presentations cute, but I liked it.
Okay, it's good.
I
You're welcome.
appreciate it. All right, if there's no other discussion on this item, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the internal audit gap assessment. The materials for this agenda item are included for your review. I will provide information just in connection with this agenda item, and it's that there's not been a lot of progress in this space. We were given quite a few recommendations from the M&A group who completed the gap assessment, and so due to the absence in that role, we just haven't made a lot of movement from internal audit. But one of the pieces that is important for this board to know is we've got some work to do from a strategic planning perspective, because the recommendation for us to have a strategic audit plan is dependent on the strategic plan of the board. So we can't put the cart before the horse here. So this gives us time to really put some things in place that need to be in place so that we can start to check off some of these recommendations from this gap assessment. Other discussions on this? Thoughts? I don't want this to be the Dimeta show. All right, if there's no other discussion, I'll move on to the next area, which is the review of the internal audit plan. The materials for this agenda item are included for your review. I will provide just a quick update in this space, and this is informational as was the last item, so no vote is required. And so in reviewing the internal audit plan prior to the transition, there are quite a few areas that need to be completed. So we've got to identify what our next steps are from a resource perspective, whether that's an internal hire or outsourcing some of this work, which we've always said the internal audit plan required more hours than one individual FTE could even support. So we were always going to have to identify the risk-based items that needed to be done. And so we are really going to be pressing to get this done quickly. I had a meeting with Michael Campbell in the comptroller's office, just giving him an update on where we are. And his, and Travis Mann, I met with him too, who was a previous senior, audit senior. And both of them just, really stated that it's important for us to make sure that this remains a priority. So I'm saying this in this board space, also for university officials to be aware that this has to become a priority and fill in this role. Other questions? One area that I I do need to mention that we were previously told that the M&A group would be helping us identify or complete some of the items in the work plan. Those items were test of, let me say it correctly, internal controls for accounts payable, payroll, procurement, travel, and cash collections. And so I am going to have to reach out to get a status from them. They were not providing written statuses, so we need to get that so we can figure out where we are when it comes to that. Other questions? Discussion? Comments? If not, then if there's no other business for the audit committee, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting to enter into executive session for a discussion of items deemed confidential under state law?
I move to adjourn the public session.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Does that motion allow us to move into executive session too, just
Yes,
for clarity?
and I'll reread it for the record. So the motion, or the question is on the motion to adjourn the meeting to enter into executive session for discussion of items deemed confidential under state law. All those in favor, say yes.
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 The motion passes.
All right. The time is 3:48 and we are adjourned. It will not go back into a public session after this.
That's correct.